Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little more uncomfortable than your dad's old recliner from 1987. The world of 1950s America. Specifically, how the fabulously wealthy managed to keep everyone else exactly where they wanted them. And no, not through inspirational speeches or hard work, but through loopholes, lobbyists, and a sprinkle of good old-fashioned sit down and stop asking questions. Because the 1950s weren't all soda fountains, shiny Buicks and pastel Tupperware parties. Behind the scenes, the rich were playing economic whack-a-mole with anyone who dared try to climb a rung on the social ladder. So before we wander into suburbia's suspiciously manicured hedges, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy drifting off to mildly unhinged history. And thank you for suggesting this topic, by the way. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Someone out there is absolutely in bed at 3:12 a.m. eating crackers right now, and honestly, I respect that energy. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for that soft nostalgic hum to get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet under the blanket so no imaginary 1950s banker can foreclose on your toes. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered, what was it actually like trying to buy a house in the 1950s if you weren't rich or weren't the right kind of buyer? Did your boss really get to pay you whatever he wanted as long as he smiled and wore a nice hat? Why did every ad claim you could achieve the American dream, and yet somehow the fine print always said terms and conditions apply mostly to you? And why did rich people seem to have secret meetings where they all agreed that healthcare should cost roughly as much as a family car? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in 1954. You're standing in a neighbourhood where every lawn looks suspiciously identical, every living room has the same beige lamp, and yet somehow your wallet has never felt lighter. Welcome to postwar America, where the wealthy stay wealthy, and you? Well, good luck. You step out onto a street so clean it looks professionally ironed. Rows of pastel houses stretch into the horizon like a box of crayons someone had melted into suburbia. The sales brochure promised an opportunity. The bankers promised fairness. But the fine print? That was written in a font only the wealthy could read. You start walking, marvelling at how every lawn looks aggressively identical. Grass trimmed so precisely it feels like somebody used a ruler blessed by a team of architects. Even the birds seem to chirp in a polite, regulation-approved tone. You take in the suburban scent, fresh paint, watered lawns, and just the faintest hint of financial inequality wafting from behind the white picket fences. Let's talk about these houses for a moment. They all look affordable at first glance. Neat little boxes with cheerful shutters and driveways just long enough to park the fantasy of middle-class comfort. But then you talk to the real estate agent, who has a smile so wide it looks like it's holding secrets. You step inside a model home. The floors shine, the furniture is staged to perfection. You can practically hear the catalogue whisper, "Imagine your perfect life here assuming your wallet qualifies." And that's when the reality sets in. Because the moment you sit down to review the numbers, the dream evaporates like mist under a fluorescent lamp. The house that looked so inviting comes bundled with hidden fees, impossible loan requirements, and interest rates that feel like a practical joke, one that only the wealthy find funny. Redlining lingers in the background like a ghost that refuses to leave the party. Neighbourhoods graded by invisible hands declare who is worthy of buying here and who is financially risky, which is code for we've already decided no. You try not to take it personally, but when a map is designed to exclude you, it's hard not to feel like you're the only person who showed up to a costume party in the wrong era. You keep walking past houses where families unload groceries from shiny new station wagons, families who seemingly walked into their mortgages with the ease of someone opening a bag of chips. Meanwhile, you're over here clutching your paperwork like it's the final boss battle in a role-playing game you were never trained to play. The difference? They had a cheat code, generational wealth, better credit scores, and an entire financial system with a subtle welcome sign for their demographic. You cross the street and notice a sold sign planted in the yard of a home you secretly hoped might be yours. The sign looks cheerful, almost celebratory. You try to ignore the sting, but the suburban mirage works that way. Hopeful from afar, emotionally expensive up close. You imagine yourself inside, unpacking boxes, hosting barbecues, mowing your new lawn with neighbourly pride. But the moment you try to picture the mortgage payments, your brain quietly exits the simulation. The sensory details hit you next. The distant hum of lawnmowers operated by people who can afford repairs. The soft thud of children bouncing basketballs on driveways that belong to their families outright. The smell of charcoal drifting from a backyard grill, meat sizzling in pure financial confidence. You take a deep breath, trying not to inhale the subtle aroma of inequality. And just when you think you might give up entirely, you pass by a couple sitting on their porch, sipping lemonade like extras in a 1950s promotional film. They wave. You wave back. And for a moment, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, the American dream is still out there somewhere, waiting for a loophole, a lottery ticket, or a rare alignment of stars. But then a banker's voice echoes in your memory. We'll be in touch, and you know they won't. Welcome to the suburban mirage. It looks beautiful from a distance, but up close, it's a kaleidoscope of barriers disguised as pastels. You wander into a mortgage office ready to buy your first home, only to watch the banker look at you, then at your address, then back at you with a smile that says, "I'm about to ruin your dreams politely." Welcome to redlining, where invisible lines on a map decide your entire future. You sit down on a chair upholstered in a fabric that can only be described as mid-century disappointment. The banker flips through your paperwork with exaggerated slowness, as though hoping you'll spontaneously combust before he has to give you an answer. His desk is spotless, his tie is symmetrical, and everything about him screams, "I profit from systems I pretend not to understand." Then he pulls out the map. Not a modern map with convenient icons and optimistic colour-coded markers. No, this is a parchment-like relic covered in angry red blocks, yellow borders, and green neighbourhoods glowing like emerald cities behind electric fences. You lean forward, trying to decode the colours like you're cracking a Cold War cipher. He taps a red area gently with his pen tip, smiling as if he's pointing out a charming tourist attraction. "Oh," he says casually, "you live here," as if your address were a questionable medical condition. Let's talk about that map for a moment. It's not just ink and zoning codes. It's a kaleidoscope of generational roadblocks. It's a bureaucratic Ouija board that predicts property values and reveals, with embarrassing honesty, exactly who the financial system thinks deserves a home and who deserves a politely worded rejection. You don't need a psychic to interpret it, just a working set of eyes and a tolerance for mild existential dread. You try asking practical questions, things like, what can I do to qualify? Or is there another loan option? The banker responds with phrases so vague they feel like weather forecasts. It's complicated, these neighbourhoods are considered unstable, and the ever-popular "we're looking for a different type of applicant." You'd get clearer answers from a magic 8-ball. As he continues explaining, you realise something unsettling. The map isn't describing you. It's describing who the system has already decided you're allowed to become. If your neighbourhood is marked red, your interest rates soar before you even apply. Your down payment requirements inflate like a balloon animal made by an unfriendly clown. And your odds of approval? About the same as finding a unicorn in the produce aisle. You walk out of the office with a stack of brochures that you're 90% sure were printed for legal reasons only. Outside, the air feels heavier, as if suburbia itself is guarding the gates. You imagine an entire team of bankers meeting in a dimly lit conference room, circling neighbourhoods on maps like they're drafting battle plans. If they had moustaches, they'd be twirling them. Walking home, you notice the contrast everywhere. Some blocks have freshly paved sidewalks and trees spaced like they were arranged by professional botanists. Others have cracked pavement, wilting grass, and houses that look tired, like they've been waiting decades for financial help that never arrives. And that's the thing. Redlining doesn't just shut you out of a mortgage, it shapes school funding, grocery availability, public transportation, and whether you'll ever find a dentist who accepts your insurance. It's not a single locked door, it's an entire hallway of locked doors, each one labelled, "Have you tried being wealthier?" Modern comparisons drift through your mind. Trying to buy a home here feels like trying to upgrade your phone plan only to discover the premium options are reserved for celebrities and people named Chadwick. The system keeps offering you the economic equivalent of dial-up internet. But you keep walking, and as you pass each block, you begin to understand the secret that bankers won't admit. People build communities even when systems try to erase them. Joy, culture, resilience, noisy porches, shared meals, music drifting out of windows. No amount of red ink can stop that. Still, you'd like a house. And the banker's smile still haunts you. The polite one. The one that said everything without saying anything. Welcome to the great housing lockout. The map has been drawn, the lines are set, and you're expected to stay exactly where the ink tells you. Until you don't. You shuffle into a fluorescent lit office where everyone wears the same tie and the same forced smile. Promotions hang in the air like mythical creatures, rumoured to exist, rarely seen. Your paycheck. It grows slower than a houseplant you keep forgetting to water. You take your place at your desk, which looks exactly like every other desk. Beige, boxy, and radiating the emotional energy of a baked potato. The typewriter clacks in protest as you settle in, at each keystroke sounding like it's filing its own complaint. Your inbox is full of memos requesting things like increased synergy and improved efficiency, which are phrases that mean absolutely nothing but sound just professional enough that no one questions them. Let's talk about your salary, or rather the polite little number printed on your check every 2 weeks. It's reliable, predictable, and utterly incapable of beating inflation in a fistfight. It's stuck in a time loop where it rises by exactly 3 cents a year, no matter how many weekends you sacrifice or how many lunches you inhale at your desk, like a stressed-out woodland creature. You ask about raises occasionally, and your manager gives you that sympathetic look, the one reserved for children who ask why the sky isn't green. Everyone around you seems trapped in the same quiet cycle. You hear colleagues brag about being loyal to the company for 14 years, and you can't help but wonder if loyalty actually pays dividends, or if it's just something corporations say to encourage you not to run away screaming. The executives talk a big game about opportunity and upward mobility, but whenever someone actually tries to move upward, the ladder mysteriously vanishes, replaced by another memo. Please be patient. Your time will come. Spoiler, it won't. As the day goes on, you notice the hierarchy of the office more clearly. Managers stroll in with a confidence that suggests they haven't brewed their own coffee since the Eisenhower administration. Meanwhile, you're sharing a percolator with 8 other people, all of whom pretend they don't know who used the last of the grounds. It was Bob, it's always Bob. The difference between floors is stark. The higher-ups have carpeting. You have linoleum that curls in the corners like it's trying to escape. Your tasks blur together into one endless river of paperwork, signatures and staplers that jam exactly when you need them most. The work isn't backbreaking, but it is mind-numbing. Like someone distilled boredom into liquid form and poured it onto your desk. Occasionally you dream of starting your own business, opening your own shop, being your own boss, but then you remember that the bank laughed at you last time you requested a loan. Not rudely, but with the soft chuckle of someone who has never had to count pennies. Around lunchtime, people gather in the break room to eat sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and discuss their hopes in tones so quiet you'd think dreaming required government approval. They talk about wanting a bigger house, a better car, a promotion that pays more than a sack of potatoes. But everyone knows the truth. The company gives just enough to keep you comfortable, never enough to let you leave. Afternoons drag on with the grace of a melting ice cube. You sit through a meeting where the supervisor explains that raises are not in the budget this quarter, despite the fact that he drove in this morning in a car so shiny it probably has a favourite chauffeur. You watch him talk about fiscal responsibility while adjusting cufflinks worth more than your grocery budget. By the time 5 o'clock rolls around, your legs feel like they've fused to your chair. You stand, stretch, and stare out the window at the executives heading to their cars in reserved spaces, a daily parade of suits, cigars, and confidence. You share the bus with the other salary host sages, each of you calculating how many hours you traded today for a paycheck that still can't afford the good brand of cereal. Being a company man in the 1950s wasn't about climbing a ladder. It was about holding on tightly while the ladder slowly tilted, shrank, or disappeared entirely. It was stability, but stability like a folding chair. Fine until someone leans too hard. And tomorrow, you'll be right back here. Fluorescent lights buzzing, typewriter clacking, paycheck sighing, trying to catch up to a cost of living that runs miles ahead. Your kid has a fever, so naturally you go to the only doctor in town whose waiting room looks like a mahogany museum of wealth. The bill will be approximately 1 month of your income, and that's before the tests. You sit in a stiff wooden chair that feels like it was carved specifically to remind the poor of their place. The walls are lined with framed diplomas and photographs of the doctor shaking hands with important men, senators, governors, possibly even a minor celebrity from a toothpaste commercial. The air smells faintly of cigar smoke and generational advantage. Meanwhile, your kid clings to your sleeve, sniffling and radiating enough fever heat to fry an egg. You glance across the room and see the wealthy patients. They're lounging in plush armchairs, reading magazines dated this year, a luxury in itself, sipping tiny complimentary cups of something that tastes vaguely like lemon water and elitism. The receptionist beams at them like they're old friends. When she looks at you, her smile tightens into the expression someone wears when they're trying to decide if you belong in the building. Let's talk about the healthcare system for a moment. It isn't a system, really. More like an elaborate obstacle course designed by people who have never tripped over anything in their lives. Rich families stroll into appointments like they're checking into a spa. They get full physicals, preventive care, consultations, and medical advice delivered on crisp stationery. You, on the other hand, get a stern warning that your insurance doesn't cover optional procedures, like diagnosing the illness. Your turn finally arrives, and the nurse ushers you down a hallway lined with glossy brochures. They show photos of smiling families frolicking through fields, accompanied by text that says things like, "Ask your doctor if hope is right for you," which feels a little on the nose. The examination room contains a single steel table, a chair with no cushion, and lighting that makes you look like you haven't slept since 1931. The doctor enters with the practiced sigh of a man whose time is always worth more than yours. He barely glances at your kid before reaching for a gold-plated stethoscope, which he uses with the enthusiasm of someone checking the temperature of soup. After roughly 6 seconds, he announces, "We'll need tests." He says it with all the ceremony of a judge sentencing you financially. You ask how much the tests cost. He answers in a number so high it's basically a phone number. You swallow hard, nodding slowly, pretending you have savings somewhere other than your kitchen jar labelled "maybe someday." While you're contemplating how many extra shifts you'll need to pay for this appointment, the doctor turns to grab a clipboard. That's when the wealthy patient 2 rooms down receives a greeting worthy of royalty. You hear laughter, the clinking of ice in a glass, someone asking about the summer home. Meanwhile, your child coughs softly, and you're offered exactly one tissue, rough, off-brand, and handed to you like the last scrap of civilization. Once the appointment is over, the nurse hands you a bill so thick it could double as a doorstop. You notice the wealthy patient stroll out moments later with a small envelope, a handshake, and a reminder to call any time. You get a reminder to pay in 10 days to avoid penalties. You leave the office already exhausted, your kid bundled in your arms like a tiny feverish burrito. Outside, the sun is bright but unsympathetic. You weigh your options. Should you buy groceries this week, or should you pay for the privilege of hearing a doctor say, "It's probably viral"? Back home, you reach for the familiar tin of aspirin, the universal cure-all for anyone whose wallet never got invited to the healthcare party. 2 tablets and a hopeful prayer later, you tuck your kid into bed and wonder how the wealthy managed to glide through the world as if someone padded their entire lives with soft carpeting. Healthcare for the rich is a polished machine, smooth, fast, and quiet. Healthcare for everyone else is a squeaky bicycle missing one pedal, wobbling uphill in the rain. But hey, at least aspirin is still cheap. You're told education is the ticket to upward mobility, but the local school is overcrowded, underfunded, and has exactly one textbook that still lists Herbert Hoover as president. Meanwhile, across town, the wealthy get Latin tutors and fencing lessons. You arrive at the school one morning, stepping over a crack in the sidewalk so large it looks like the earth itself tried to drop out of class. The building looms ahead, tired bricks, peeling paint, and windows that rattle whenever someone sneezes too enthusiastically. Inside, the hallways smell faintly of chalk dust, old coats, and the kind of despair that only government funding can produce. Your kid squeezes your hand before joining a swarm of students funneling into classrooms designed for 20 but somehow holding 42. Teachers weave through the chaos like battlefield medics, clutching clipboards and coffee mugs with the shaky determination of people who have seen too many budget cuts. You watch them herd children with the same energy one might use to keep a group of determined goats from escaping the pen. Let's talk textbooks. The one in your kid's classroom has been rebound so many times the tape alone could qualify as its own structural component. The maps inside still show countries that no longer exist, and the margins are filled with the doodles of at least 3 previous decades of bored children. The teacher flips it open with a sigh that says, "We're doing our best," which is what every underfunded school in the country murmurs collectively each morning. Meanwhile, across town, wealthy families glide into immaculate private academies, institutions with chandeliers, polished floors, and libraries that smell like leather and ambition. Their classrooms have individual desks made from real wood, not government-issued splinter traps. Their students learn Latin verbs they will never use and practice fencing moves that could hypothetically defend them during a very polite duel. Your school teachers don't run in the hallway, don't eat paste, and please ignore the leak near the gym. Back in your neighbourhood, school lunch is a rotating mystery of beige shapes. Across town, their cafeteria resembles a modest bistro where children casually discuss summer homes over chicken cordon bleu. You grew up knowing pizza was a rectangle and milk came only in tiny sweating cartons. Their milk is organic and poured from glass bottles by someone named Harold. During a parent-teacher meeting, you sit in a folding chair that tries to collapse every time you shift your weight. The teacher explains that class sizes will be increasing just a bit, which you have learned is code for "we've run out of chairs but not children." She gestures to the chalkboard, which has cracked through the middle like a fault line. "We'll be getting a new one soon," she says brightly. "But you've heard this before. New things rarely arrive. They age out of the wish list before the funding ever appears." Across town, wealthy parents attend meetings where teachers wear blazers, not sweaters with unravelling sleeves. Their classrooms come equipped with globes that spin smoothly and projectors that aren't fueled by hope alone. Their children are encouraged to pursue music, art, academic clubs, and polo. Yes, polo, as though the average child naturally encounters horses during recess. You watch your kid come home with homework scribbled on paper so thin it's almost transparent. They ask you questions the textbook can't answer, because the world has changed faster than the school budget. You do your best, improvising explanations that would make any historian mildly uncomfortable. Education is supposed to be the ladder, the one you climb out of poverty, out of limitation, out of the cycle you're trying so hard to break. But when the rungs keep snapping beneath your feet, it starts to feel less like climbing and more like clinging on, while gravity laughs softly in the background. And still, you keep pushing. You pack lunches, you attend meetings, you help with impossible homework, you advocate even when it feels like shouting into a void. Because despite everything stacked against you, you still believe in the power of learning, even if across town the wealthy are learning how to parry with épées. You enter the office and immediately understand one thing. The richer your boss is, the bigger his desk is. And the bigger his desk is, the smaller your chances are of ever sitting behind one. The desks here aren't just furniture. They're status symbols carved from wood so shiny you can see your crushed hopes reflected in the varnish. Your own desk is small enough that a stack of papers qualifies as structural instability. Meanwhile, your boss, who looks like he was born wearing a suit, sits behind a slab of oak large enough to serve Thanksgiving dinner on. His desk has drawers you're pretty sure he's never opened, because men like him don't reach for things. Things are handed to them. You take a seat and immediately hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, sounding suspiciously like they're judging your posture. The office has that classic 1950s scent. Paper, cigarette smoke, coffee brewed 12 hours ago, and ambition that has started to ferment. Your co-workers shuffle around in nearly identical outfits, grey suits, dull ties, hair parted so sharply you could slice bread with it. Everyone looks just uncomfortable enough to prove they're taking their job seriously. Let's talk haircuts, because in this workplace, hairstyles are basically resumes. The executives have hair so neatly combed it looks like it was ironed into place. Not a single strand rebels. These haircuts communicate authority, confidence, and the sort of privilege that allows a man to leave the house without worrying about bus fares. Your haircut, meanwhile, says, "I trimmed this myself with kitchen scissors because the barbershop raised prices again." You try to focus on your tasks, typing reports, stamping forms, filing documents in cabinets that always stick at exactly the wrong moment. The typewriter clacks with all the energy of a machine contemplating labour rights. Paper piles up faster than you can shuffle it, and your shoulders slowly rise toward your ears as if trying to retreat from responsibility. Every so often, an executive strolls past your desk. You can always tell who they are because they walk like the hallway belongs to them. Their shoes click confidently across the floor, echoing like tiny reminders of your financial position. They smell faintly of expensive aftershave and leisure time. You smell like stress and the coffee you spilled on yourself that morning. You attend meetings that could easily have been one memo. The men at the top sit in cushioned chairs while everyone else perches stiffly on metal seats designed by someone who hated ergonomics. Your supervisor gives long speeches about productivity goals and corporate synergy, which are phrases invented specifically to sound important while meaning absolutely nothing. When he adjusts his tie, you can practically hear your free time being reassigned. Lunch offers no relief. You unwrap a sandwich compressed so tightly it's now a geological formation. Across the cafeteria, the higher-ups eat in their own room, a place rumoured to have real plates and at least one window. They discuss golf scores, summer trips, and stock portfolios while you discuss whether staplers can be written off as emotional support devices. Promotion? That's the mythical beast everyone whispers about. Occasionally, someone claims they heard of a guy in accounting who got one, but no one has actually seen him. For most people, the career ladder is less of a ladder and more of a mildly slanted ramp leading back to your same desk. And let's not forget the unspoken rule: the more expensive your boss's haircut is, the more he earns by doing less work than you do. You watch him stroll out early on Fridays while you're still elbow deep in urgent paperwork, which turns out to be just paperwork he didn't feel like doing. By 5 o'clock, your spine feels like a stack of mismatched coasters. You step outside into the evening air and breathe deeply for the first time all day. The executives drive off in polished cars that purr like satisfied cats. You wait for the bus, clutching your lunch pail like a badge of survival. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again, dodging fluorescent lights, wrestling filing cabinets, and watching perfectly groomed men glide effortlessly up a corporate hierarchy that seems to have been built specifically to keep you in your seat. Because in the 1950s workplace, success isn't just about skill, it's about haircuts, desks, and the silent understanding that your boss's shoes will always shine a little brighter than your future. Your wife wants a job, but employers smile sweetly and say, "We don't pay women a living wage, because why should they need one? Equality is a lovely idea, just not a funded one. The interview goes exactly the way you expect." She sits across from a manager whose hair is greased into a shape that defies both gravity and empathy. He glances at her resume, nods approvingly, and then immediately explains why the job pays approximately enough for one bus fare and a sandwich. "It's just supplemental income," he says proudly, as though announcing a breakthrough in economic philosophy. "Your husband handles the real finances, of course." Your wife smiles politely, the same tight-lipped smile she wears when someone explains why her opinion is cute. Meanwhile, across town, men with half her education and none of her determination are getting hired into jobs that come with benefits, pensions, and salaries large enough to afford fancy bread, the kind without visible preservatives. She could do their work with one hand tied behind her back and still beat them in efficiency, but the system doesn't care about skill. It cares about the assumption that she should already have a man paying her bills. At home, she practices her typing, faster, cleaner, and more accurate than anyone in your office. But every job listing she responds to comes with that same baked-in clause: wages based not on competence, but on the belief that women's money is just decorative, a cute little bonus, something to buy curtains maybe. Let's talk workplace culture. When your wife finally lands a part-time secretary position, the office feels less like a workplace and more like a parade of assumptions. Men stroll past her desk dropping things, papers, letters, sometimes entire emotional burdens, with the expectation she'll clean everything up. When she finishes early, they hand her more. When she finishes that early, they hand her their coffee orders. Her salary remains firmly glued to the bottom rung of the pay scale, no matter how many late nights she spends filing, typing, organising, and repairing the office typewriter with the precision of a battlefield mechanic. The dress code adds insult to economic injury. She is expected to present herself nicely, which translates to affordable but stylish dresses, perfect hair, and makeup applied so invisibly it looks like she just naturally woke up flawless. Never mind that her paycheck barely covers stockings, let alone expectations. If she shows up looking tired, the men comment. If she shows up looking too nice, the men also comment. It's a performance with no applause. One afternoon, she overhears two male co-workers discussing salaries. Their numbers are so much higher than hers that she briefly wonders if she accidentally signed up for a children's version of the job. You try to comfort her when she tells you about it, but you both know the truth. The gender pay gap isn't a glitch. It's the whole operating system. Still, she persists. She comes home with ink on her sleeves and pride in her posture. She tells you about the letters she typed, the schedules she organised, the small triumphs and silent frustrations. She's good. She knows she's good. But the world keeps telling her she's support staff in her own life, across town, Wealthy families hire tutors for their daughters, French, piano, etiquette classes, preparing them for futures built around marrying well. Your wife wants something else. Her own money, her own autonomy, her own professional dignity. And every time she pushes against the system, even slightly, it pushes back twice as hard. Yet she keeps going, because the gender pay gap might be carved into every paycheck, every policy, every condescending smile, but so is her determination. She's playing a rigged game, but she refuses to stop rolling the dice. And in a decade where women were told to stay home, stay quiet, and stay grateful, her simple act of working, really working, is its own quiet rebellion. A rebellion that, despite the paychecks, she refuses to abandon. You pay your taxes like a responsible adult. Meanwhile, your wealthy neighbour writes off his fourth boat as a business expense and somehow receives a refund big enough to buy another boat. Tax season arrives with all the enthusiasm of a damp sock. You gather your receipts and W-2s, spreading them across the kitchen table like you're preparing for a ritual sacrifice. Your pencil is chewed, your patience is thin, and every instruction in the tax booklet seems designed to measure how long it takes before you give up and hope the government never notices you. Meanwhile, just across the hedge, your wealthy neighbour lounges in a deck chair, sipping something citrusy and cool, humming contentedly as he hands his paperwork to someone called my tax attorney, Charles. Let's talk about Charles. He wears suits with more fabric in them than your living room curtains. He drives a car with a name you can't pronounce, and he has a mysterious ability to make entire fortunes vanish on paper. You can hear him through the open window sometimes, saying things like, "We'll categorize that under maritime consulting, and have you considered creating a shell corporation for your shell collection?" Every statement sounds perfectly legal and deeply suspicious. Your own tax return is a straightforward affair. List your income, subtract a modest deduction, and pray you don't owe more than what's currently sitting in the jar labelled emergency. Absolutely do not touch. Your neighbour's return? It's basically a novella. 20 pages dedicated to creatively explaining why he should not only keep most of his money, but also receive a thank you cheque from the government for the stress of being wealthy. You know he's rich because he uses words like portfolio and diversification while you use words like sale and coupon. His financial vocabulary has an accent, yours has an apology. When April rolls around, you mail your tax return and immediately feel a twinge of anxiety, as if you've just confessed to a crime you didn't commit. Your neighbour, however, celebrates tax season like a holiday. He throws a barbecue. He invites friends over. They clink glasses together and toast to another year of beating the system fair and square, which is rich coming from people who keep inventing new ways to redefine the word fair. You once asked him, innocently, how he manages to pay so little. He smiled, a smile so warm and rehearsed it could sell toothpaste, and said, "It's simple, you just have to know the rules." But these rules are not written in any book available at your local library. They're whispered in country clubs, exchanged over rounds of golf, and passed down like family heirlooms. Every year, you fix something on your tax form, a typo, a missing box, a questionable number. Every year, he fixes something too. The depreciation schedule on his yacht, the storage fees for his vintage sale collection, the fuel costs for research purposes, which apparently involves cruising around the lake while drinking champagne. You imagine the IRS reviewing his paperwork, squinting at line 47, and then shrugging because Charles has written an explanation so dense it may actually qualify as modern art. Meanwhile, if you accidentally forget to carry a one, you'll receive a letter so stern it could knock the wallpaper off your dining room. And you can't help noticing the pattern. The more money someone has, the easier it is for them to argue they shouldn't have to part with any of it. You, on the other hand, must provide receipts for everything. including the shoes you wore to walk to work. Still, when your refund finally arrives, small, humble, but undeniably yours, you feel a flicker of triumph. You deposit it gently, as though handling a rare exotic bird. Across the street, your neighbour receives a refund so large he buys a new business canoe because, apparently, aquatic tax deductions are endless. The wealthy call it strategy. You call it magic. The government calls it regrettably permissible. And year after year, the disappearing act continues. Their tax burdens shrink while yours stays exactly where it is. Welcome to the 1950s financial circus, where the rich perform tricks, the loopholes never close, and the rest of us pay admission just to watch the show. You stand proudly with your service record in hand, ready to claim the benefits you earned, only to discover that access depends entirely on which neighbourhood you live in and who processes your paperwork. You walk into the veterans' office with a confidence you haven't felt in years. You served your country, you did everything asked of you. On paper, the GI Bill is supposed to be your golden ticket. Education, housing loans, job training, the whole shimmering post-war package. But the moment you step up to the counter, you're greeted by a clerk whose expression says, "Ah, optimism. How adorable." He motions for your paperwork with the same enthusiasm someone might have for picking up a damp towel. He skims your forms, then glances at the address you carefully wrote in neat handwriting. That's when his tone shifts. Not dramatically, just a subtle change. Like a record needle drifting half an inch. He murmurs, tapping the page thoughtfully. This might be challenging. Challenging, of course, is bureaucratic code for not happening. See, the GI Bill isn't a single system. It's a sprawling network of local offices, lenders, schools and officials, each one with its own definitions of who is eligible, deserving or the right type of applicant. And in the 1950s, those definitions look suspiciously like the red-lined maps pinned up in banks across America. Neighbourhoods aren't just places, they're verdicts. You try not to take it personally, but it's hard not to feel singled out when the man behind you in line, living in a different zip code, wearing a slightly shinier suit, walks away with a stamped approval in under 3 minutes. Let's talk education. You imagine yourself attending college on the GI Bill, sitting in classrooms, learning new skills, maybe even building a career that won't wear your joints down by age 40. But when you meet with the admissions counsellor, she gives you a sweet smile and hands you a brochure for night classes, more suited to your background. Translation: the university takes GI Bill students, just not you, not from your neighbourhood, not with your funding officer. Meanwhile, wealthier vets stroll effortlessly into fully funded degrees, engineering, law, business, paved with opportunities that unfold like red carpets. For them, the GI Bill is a springboard. For you, it's a maze where every turn leads to another politely worded rejection letter. Then there's housing. You go to apply for a low-interest VA-backed loan, daydreaming about a small home in the suburbs, a place with more than one bathroom and maybe even a patch of lawn for your kid. But the lender doesn't even hide the smirk when he sees your address. "We don't insure loans in that area," he says. "Risky." Risky is a generous way of saying, "We've already decided no." He offers a pamphlet instead, thin, wrinkled, smelling faintly of disappointment. Across town, though, veterans with the right complexion and the right zip code are being waved into brand new cookie-cutter homes with open arms. Their loans go through instantly. The American dream is practically delivered by mail. Employment? Same story. Employers toss job postings around like confetti, boasting about hiring heroes, but somehow the best positions always go to someone else, someone with connections, someone with a better fit, someone whose neighbourhood never raised an eyebrow on a loan application. You begin to realise something infuriating. The GI Bill wasn't flawed in theory. It was flawed in execution. filtered through gatekeepers who enforced familiar lines of exclusion with smiles, stamps, and phrases like limited availability. Still, you don't give up. You take the classes they will let you enroll in. You work the jobs that do hire you. You save pennies in jars because banks won't approve your mortgage. You make do. You push forward. You carve opportunity out of wood that was never meant to bend. And late at night, when the house is quiet and you're sitting at the table sorting bills, you think of the promises made to you, grand, sweeping, patriotic promises, and how they evaporated under fluorescent lights and clerks' tight smiles. The GISA bill changed America, but it didn't change it for everyone. Some veterans got highways, others got detours, and somehow you're still walking the longer road. You work all day for wages that funnel right back into the grocery store your employer owns. Congratulations. You're playing capitalism on the impossible difficulty setting. Company towns look charming from a distance. Rows of identical houses, a tidy main street, a general store with smiling clerks in starched aprons. But once you live in one, you realise the whole place operates like a polite pastel-coloured trap. Your boss doesn't just pay your salary. He sets your rent, sells your groceries, controls your utilities, and holds your job security in the same hand he uses to pat himself on the back at town meetings. It's not a community. It's a monopoly with wallpaper. Your paycheck arrives every week, crisp and hopeful, until you take a closer look and remember it's not really money, just company-issued scrip, a fun little coupon system redeemable only at stores your boss also happens to own. It's like being paid in gift cards you didn't ask for. Things cost more here too, because why wouldn't they? Your boss sets the price of bread. And shockingly, he does not set it based on your convenience. Walking through the town centre, you notice something surreal. Every building has the same subtle signature. The barbershop? Company-owned. The gas station? Company-owned. The diner where the coffee is a fascinating combination of weak and bitter? Yes, also company-owned. You begin to suspect the birds might file taxes under his name. Let's talk rent. Every month a tidy slip arrives at your door explaining that due to maintenance costs, your payments are going up again. Maintenance costs, you note, for things that never actually get maintained. The roof still leaks. The pipes rattle like they're haunted. The wallpaper peels with the enthusiasm of a bored child. But the number on the slip keeps climbing because, well, who are you going to complain to? The landlord is also your employer, and the mayor, and if rumours are true, the choir director on Sundays. At the grocery store, you push your cart past items priced with the confidence of a luxury boutique. Everything costs just a little too much. Milk, potatoes, even the bread that tastes suspiciously like cardboard dipped in nostalgia. You glance toward the register and see families counting their scrip with care, handing over little booklets of coupons like they're performing a ritual sacrifice. You do the same, trying not to think about how your entire week's work will be undone by one shopping trip and a bag of onions. Payday meetings are their own spectacle. Your boss gathers the workers, clears his throat, and announces improvements that only benefit himself. Productivity expectations climb. Overtime remains unpaid, and any time someone suggests organising for better conditions, the room falls silent. Because in a town where your boss owns the grocery store, refusing to work isn't just risking hunger, it's guaranteeing it. On Sundays, you stroll past the nicer homes on the hill, the ones belonging to the managers and executives. Their houses are bigger, their lawns greener, and their rent mysteriously unchanged. They greet you with the kind of smile people use when they're trying to appear friendly, but are terrified you might ask them for something inconvenient, like fairness. At night, after another long day, you sit on your porch listening to the distant hum of the mining equipment or factory floor that never quite sleeps. Your neighbours wave tiredly. You wave back. You share a quiet understanding. None of you are getting out of this place without a miracle, a union, or a sudden natural disaster. And yet, you keep going. You wake up each morning, lace your boots, and return to the job that pays you just enough to survive the week, never enough to leave. Because that is the point of a company town, to make the fence invisible by calling it home. You fall asleep knowing the next day will look exactly the same. The company wants it that way. After all, when your boss owns the entire world you live in, where else could you possibly go? You apply for a loan to fix a broken fridge and receive a 27% interest rate. Meanwhile, the wealthy get zero-interest loans for hobbies like collecting vintage sailboats. You sit across from the loan officer, who peers at you over his glasses with the same expression a cat gives a cardboard box it has decided not to sit in. He studies your application as though it contains ancient runes or perhaps a coded confession. Finally, he clears his throat and says, not the good kind of the kind that means he's preparing a speech about financial responsibility you definitely did not ask for. He begins by gently lecturing you about budgeting, as if you don't already stretch every dollar until it screams. He asks questions with the confidence of someone who has never made a late-night grocery decision between bread and milk. Do you really need a new refrigerator, he asks? You resist the urge to explain that your current one has become a glorified pantry with a light bulb. When he finally quotes your interest rate, your soul briefly leaves your body. 27%. It sounds less like a loan and more like punishment for existing. It reflects risk, he says, smiling politely. Risk, you note, apparently means anyone making less than an executive vice president. Then your wealthy neighbour strolls in. He's wearing golf clothes on a Tuesday at noon. He hands the same loan officer a request for financing, this time for a sailboat so old it probably came with a complimentary ghost. The loan officer lights up like a Christmas tree plugged directly into the Hoover Dam. Ah, Mr. Whitmore, 0% interest, of course. We so appreciate your continued business. You stare. The neighbour winks. You briefly contemplate reenacting a Greek tragedy in the lobby. Let's talk about credit in the 1950s. It wasn't a financial tool, it was a sorting hat for adults, and the categories were simple. Rich. Right this way, sir. Can we interest you in a second loan for no reason at all? Everyone else. Have you tried living without things? It builds character. Your credit score, such as it exists, is based on vague calculations, personal judgments, and whether or not the loan officer likes your tie. Meanwhile, wealthy families glide through the system with the ease of someone stepping onto a moving walkway at the airport. When you finally get approved, after 3 background checks, 2 letters of recommendation, and 1 spiritual test of patience, you leave the bank clutching the paperwork. The interest rate alone could fund a modest war. But hey, at least your fridge will work. Hopefully. Eventually. If it doesn't unionize out of protest. The repayment schedule is a masterpiece of subtle cruelty. Monthly payments that hover just above manageable. Fees for breathing incorrectly. A penalty if you pay late. A penalty if you pay early. And probably a penalty if your refrigerator fails again within 6 months. Standard procedure, the bank tells you. Your neighbour, meanwhile, is offered 6 months of grace period, which is bank speak for take your time, king. At home that night you sit at the kitchen table doing the math. The numbers form a shape that looks like a financial threat. Your spouse leans over your shoulder, sighs deeply, and gets the aspirin. You wonder if modern medieval scribes felt this same despair when copying long Latin texts by candlelight. Across town, your neighbour unwraps a brand new sailboat polishing kit and decides which of his handcrafted silk flags he'll hang first. This one was basically free, he says cheerfully. You consider swallowing a fossil. Still, you persevere. You pay the loan, month after month, even as the interest grows like a suspicious mushroom. You repair the fridge, you keep the house running, you juggle expenses with the grace of a sleep-deprived circus performer. Because while wealthy people play economics on easy mode, the rest of America is busy trying to survive the bonus levels, ones filled with high interest, low mercy, and banks convinced you're always one paycheck away from vanishing into the woods. Welcome to the credit trap, where the rich borrow for pleasure and you borrow for refrigeration. You sit in a diner sipping weak coffee while overhearing businessmen whispering about setting prices. Turns out, when rich guys meet for waffles, your grocery bill suffers. The diner itself is nothing unusual. Checkered floors, chrome stools, a jukebox that hasn't worked properly since Eisenhower, and a waitress who calls everyone on. But the corner booth is where the action happens. 3 businessmen perched there like well-fed vultures, leaning over plates of waffles so golden they should be kept in a vault. Their suits are crisp, their ties are smug, and their voices are soft. Soft enough to seem harmless, but not soft enough to hide the phrase coordinated pricing strategy. Your coffee tastes like burnt hope, but you sip anyway, because caffeine is cheaper than therapy. From your seat, you catch fragments of the businessman's conversation. Raise it by 5 cents. Consumers won't notice. Competition, please. They'll follow our lead. You freeze mid-sip. 5 cents doesn't sound like much until you realise these men aren't talking about 5 cents on waffles. They're talking about 5 cents on milk, on meat, on laundry soap, across every store in town. It's like listening to a group of sorcerers casually discussing which spells they'll cast on the peasants next. Price fixing isn't dramatic. There are no dark cloaks, no swirling storm clouds, no loud declarations about controlling the free market. No, it's just breakfast. Breakfast between men who know that if they all raise prices at the same time, nobody can stop them. Not the customers, not regulators, certainly not you with your coffee that tastes increasingly like betrayal. You stir your cup, pretending not to listen, but their words drift over like smoke. They discuss transportation costs, supply chains, and profit margins, phrases that sound official enough to justify anything. Meanwhile, you know exactly what their decisions mean. Less food in your pantry, fewer coins in your pocket, more nights holding receipts like manuscripts of your own economic downfall. Let's talk about the math. The businessmen raise prices by a nickel. 5 cents. A tiny number. A friendly number. The kind of number that seems harmless right up until it multiplies across every item in the store. Bread, up. Milk, up. Soap, up. Eggs, more expensive than your sanity can afford. And the worst part? Everyone assumes prices are rising for mysterious natural reasons. Inflation, supply issues, market forces. But you were there. You saw it. Prices rise because Carl from the hardware store and Leonard from the grocery chain had waffles together and decided to make your life slightly more inconvenient. After paying for your coffee 20 cents, which feels like highway robbery given the flavour, you step outside into the morning sun. Cars honk, newspapers rustle, and every sign in every shop window suddenly looks suspicious. Is the price of bread actually up because of wheat shortages? Or did Carl have waffles again? Back home, you open your pantry and take stock. The cans on the shelf look emptier than usual. The loaf of bread you bought yesterday seems smaller. The milk is already halfway gone and cost more than you want to admit. You stare at the grocery list on the counter and sigh, knowing each item is quietly conspiring against you. Meanwhile, those businessmen finish their breakfast and stroll out of the diner looking satisfied, full of waffles, full of confidence, full of economic mischief. They climb into shiny cars, drive to shiny offices, and pat themselves on the back for their strategic cooperation. You count quarters, you stretch meals, you adapt, because that's what ordinary people do when the rich treat commerce like game night. In the evening, as you rest your tired feet and listen to the soft hum of the radio, you can't help but laugh a little at the absurdity of it all. 3 men have breakfast, and somehow your grocery bill becomes a hostage negotiation. Price fixing isn't dramatic, but its impact is. It's the invisible hand of the market rummaging through your wallet. And tomorrow morning, you bet they're meeting again, and you bet they're ordering waffles. You walk into a neighbourhood ignored by city planners, where roads crumble on contact and streetlights flicker like they're afraid of the dark. Help rarely arrives. Money never does. The sidewalks tilt slightly to one side, as though even the concrete has given up and is slowly trying to slide away. Houses lean against each other like exhausted co-workers waiting for the bus. Every window tells the same story. Curtains drawn not for privacy, but to keep out the cold because insulation remains a mythical creature rumoured to live in richer areas. You step carefully past potholes so deep they have their own weather systems. Children turn them into makeshift swimming pools in summer and skating rinks in winter because childhood adapts faster than infrastructure. A bus stop sits half sunk into the ground, its bench rusted into abstract art, modern, technical, unintentional. Let's talk about funding. In this neighbourhood, funding is something that happens elsewhere. City planners hold bright, shiny meetings filled with maps and charts, but somehow their pens never drift toward this address. Whenever budgets tighten, this community becomes the first sacrificial offering. Temporary cuts, they say. Temporary, in this case, meaning forever. The schools tell the story plainly. Their playground consists of 2 swings, one missing, one squeaking like it's auditioning for a horror film. The lunchroom smells faintly of canned vegetables and resignation. Teachers hold fundraisers for pencils. Not supplies, mind you, pencils. Students bring their own paper, or they tear notebook pages into halves to make them last longer. Meanwhile, across town, wealthy schools have entire closets dedicated to art supplies alone, including glitter, which is basically liquid money. Walking further, you notice the corner store. It sells everything from bread to motor oil, mostly because it's the only store for miles. Fresh produce arrives occasionally like a celebrity cameo and disappears just as quickly. The aisles hum under flickering fluorescent lights, the kind that make every banana look philosophical. Outside, a few neighbours sit on stoops, chatting quietly. Not about vacations or stocks or golf tournaments, but about rent increases, lost jobs, and whether the city will ever fix the fire hydrant that's been leaking since Truman was president. But there's laughter too. Soft, shared, necessary. Resilience has a sense of humour out here. You see a police car roll slowly down the street. Not to help, but to monitor. It's a familiar pattern. This community is visible enough for surveillance, invisible enough for assistance. Roads don't get repaired, sidewalks don't get replaced. Trash pickup is less of a service and more of a suggestion. Yet the people endure. They patch roofs with whatever materials they can find. Tar paper, sheet metal, creative optimism. They share resources. They trade tools. They help raise children who learn early that the world is divided into neighbourhoods the government remembers and those it doesn't. And every election season, campaign flyers show up promising renewal. Smoother roads, better lighting, after-school programmes, a new era. But after the votes are counted, the flyers vanish. The promises evaporate and the streetlights continue flickering like nervous ghosts. Still, life happens here. Real life. Families gather around small kitchen tables. Neighbours check in on the elderly woman 2 houses down. Kids chase each other through empty lots laughing like the world isn't stacked against them. People squeeze joy out of scarcity in ways the wealthy will never understand. You stand in the middle of the street for a moment and breathe, and even though the air smells faintly of dust and car exhaust, there's something warm about it too. Something human, something stubborn. Because being forgotten doesn't mean disappearing. It means surviving without being seen. It means building community from duct tape and devotion. It means thriving in small, unglamorous ways that don't make headlines, but absolutely make history. The city may have overlooked this neighbourhood, but the people living here haven't overlooked each other. And somehow that's worth more than any funding proposal ever written. You join a union meeting in a stuffy basement, only to discover your boss has hired consultants whose entire job is to make sure you never earn another nickel. The basement smells like dust, determination, and whatever died in the vents sometime during the Roosevelt administration. Folding chairs are arranged in lopsided rows as if the furniture itself is nervous. A single light bulb dangles overhead, flickering gently, like even it understands union meetings must remain moody. Around you, co-workers whisper anxiously, clutching handouts about collective bargaining and cost of living adjustments, terms that feel dangerously hopeful. The union rep clears his throat, preparing to talk about how you deserve a raise. A real one. Not the traditional Fortune 500 raise of 1 nickel and a firm pat on the back. You feel a spark of something unfamiliar, optimism. But just as the rep begins outlining strategies, the door creaks open and in walk the consultants. They're easy to spot. They have shiny shoes, smooth hair, and briefcases full of expensive paperwork printed in a font that screams, "We're here to ruin your good time." They introduce themselves politely, too politely, calling the workers team members and the freezing basement a great space for open dialogue. You watch as every employee collectively stiffens. Nothing good ever comes from someone calling themselves a labour relations specialist. That's corporate code for union kryptonite. The consultants begin their presentation, projecting slides onto a wrinkled bedsheet that someone thumbtacked to the wall. Slide 1. Unions limit your freedom. You blink. Freedom? You cannot help thinking your real freedom would be the ability to fix your roof without selling a kidney. Slide 2 informs you that unions create conflict, as if conflict didn't already exist every payday, when you stare at your check like it personally betrayed you. They continue, their voices soft and steady, as if reading a bedtime story written by shareholders. We're a family, they say. A union will only divide us. You glance around, noting the facial expressions of 14 exhausted workers who look like they haven't felt family at the company since the day someone stole the communal coffee pot. Let's talk tactics. These consultants are trained like economic ninjas. They know exactly which fear buttons to press. Dues can be expensive. Strikes mean lost wages. Management might reconsider future promotions. Promotions, the mythical creatures of the workplace. No one has seen one in years. Rumour has it someone in the warehouse spotted a promotion once, but the details were sketchy and possibly just to trigger the light. Once the scare tactics lose steam, the consultants pivot to emotional manipulation. Suddenly, management is listening more than ever. They promise improved communication channels and feedback opportunities. Meanwhile, every employee knows communication consists of suggestion boxes that may or may not lead directly to the trash. The meeting drags on, and you feel your optimism slowly evaporating like a puddle under a heat lamp. The consultants end with a warning wrapped in a smile. We urge you to reconsider unionizing. We want everyone to feel empowered. Empowered in this context means quiet, compliant, and significantly underpaid. After they leave, the room falls silent. You and your co-workers exchange looks of weary understanding. You all know what just happened. Your boss didn't send those consultants because he values harmony. He sent them because if you unionize, he might have to part with some of his beloved profits. Still, the union rep isn't discouraged. He leans forward, voice low, eyes determined. "This is how they win," he says, tapping the table. "Divide, distract, and delay." The workers nod slowly. Hope flickers again, faint but stubborn. As you walk home that night, you replay the meeting in your mind. The scare tactics, the smooth voices, the subtle threats. You realize something ridiculous and powerful. If the company spent this much money trying to convince you not to unionize, maybe unionizing is worth it. Because in 1950s, America raises don't disappear by accident. They vanish the moment wealthy men hire experts to make sure you stay exactly where you are, and tomorrow you'll be back in that basement, dust, flickering bulbs, low ceilings and all, trying to climb toward fairness with a ladder the rich keep trying to kick out from under you. You turn on the television and see smiling cartoon families promising prosperity. Meanwhile, your wallet looks like a sad pancake someone stepped on. Your living room glows with that soft 1950s black and white warmth, the kind of light that makes even the peeling wallpaper look sentimental. You sit on the couch, springs poking you like they're charging admission, and flip through the 3 available channels. Every program break is interrupted by an ad, and every ad is some aggressively cheerful family telling you that your life would be perfect if you just bought the right detergent, appliance, or mystical life-improving gadget. A cartoon housewife swoops across the screen, her waist so tiny she appears structurally unsound. She giggles while pouring powdered soap into a washing machine you absolutely cannot afford. A narrator booms, "Make housework effortless!" You look at your own laundry pile, one sock permanently grey, another sock missing entirely, and wonder when exactly effortlessness is supposed to start kicking in. Then comes the cereal commercial. A smiling child digs into a bowl of sugar with the enthusiasm of someone unaware of dental bills. The announcer assures parents that this cereal builds strong bodies. You're fairly certain it builds dentists' careers instead. Let's talk about advertising. In the 1950s, ads weren't just suggestions, they were ideological essays disguised as cartoons. Every product promised happiness, stability, patriotism, and at least a 30% improvement in your general life satisfaction. If you believed every commercial, you'd think you were just one vacuum cleaner away from spiritual enlightenment. Meanwhile, your budget is carefully calculated in pencil, erased repeatedly, and still ends with a question mark. You watch ads insisting that every modern family owns a gleaming refrigerator big enough to store 2 weeks' worth of meals. Yours hums ominously, struggles to stay cold, and occasionally smells like regret. The ads love showing off brand new futuristic kitchens too, shiny countertops, spotless appliances, and housewives who always wear pearls while cooking. Your kitchen, a polite disaster. The linoleum curls at the corners, the cabinets stick shut, and the stove requires a whispered prayer every time you turn it on. Pearls would run away screaming. Then there's the car commercial. A smiling husband zooms down an empty highway, his perfect hair blowing majestically in the breeze. "Drive into the future," the voiceover proclaims. But your own car coughs whenever you ask it to go uphill, whines in cold weather, and is held together primarily by optimism and baling wire. Driving into the future feels ambitious. Driving into the grocery store parking lot already feels like a negotiation. The worst ads are the ones aimed at women. Commercial after commercial features beautiful housewives encouraging you to look your best for him by purchasing products that cost more than your weekly grocery budget. Lipstick, hairspray, dish soap that keeps your hands soft even though your hands haven't been soft since the Truman administration. The message is clear. You can't afford the luxury items they advertise, but you should feel bad about that. Every time you watch these commercials, you feel the same quiet irritation, the sense that someone is lying to you, but they're doing it so confidently you almost admire their commitment. The ads insist that everyone is prospering, that everyone has the perfect life, that everyone is cheerful, clean, wealthy, and owning matching living room furniture. But then you step outside and see reality. Neighbours struggling, groceries costing more, jobs paying less, people holding their breath as they open bills. The only thing matching is the collective exhaustion. Back on the couch, the TV crackles softly. Another commercial begins, this time for a miracle cleaning product guaranteed to transform your home. The housewife on screen flashes a grin so bright you wonder if she's seeing the same economy you are. You take a deep breath, exhale slowly, and let the static hum of the television become white noise. Because deep down, you know the truth. The ads aren't selling products. They're selling a dream designed to distract you from the math of your actual life. And tonight, as you turn off the TV and the room settles into darkness, the silence feels more honest than anything you saw on that glowing screen. You stare at a grocery bill that has somehow doubled overnight. The wealthy barely notice. You're reconsidering how many meals can be made from canned beans. You stand in the checkout line clutching a brown paper bag filled with what used to be the basics. Except now, the basics cost roughly the same as a weekend getaway to somewhere that has palm trees and financial stability. The cashier rings each item through with the solemnity of a judge handing down a sentence. Milk? Guilty. Bread? Guilty. Eggs? Guilty with extreme prejudice. You watch the total creep higher while the fluorescent lights buzz overhead like tiny financial critics. Behind you, a wealthy woman hums cheerfully while unloading organic produce, and pastries dusted with sugar so delicate it probably has a trust fund. She doesn't even look at the prices. She simply smiles at the cashier, who smiles back with the kind of warmth that only appears when someone purchases groceries worth more than your monthly rent. Let's talk about how the prices got here. Yesterday, everything was, well, not affordable, but predictable. Then the grocers got together, maybe made some aggressive eye contact and decided that butter needed to cost approximately the same as jewellery. Transportation expenses, they say. Supply shortages, economic adjustments, fancy phrases that all translate to "good luck, fellow citizen." You walk through the aisles like an archaeologist uncovering artifacts. The cereal is smaller, the meat is pricier. Flour comes in bags so tiny they seem designed for fairies. Even the apples look at you apologetically as if whispering, "Don't blame us, blame the system." Your meal planning becomes an Olympic event. You do mental math faster than anyone at the bank. Can you stretch this chicken for 2 meals? 3? How many ways can potatoes be reinvented before your family stages a rebellion? You start to see beans not as a side dish, but as a lifestyle, a philosophy, a survival tactic. Meanwhile, wealthy families stroll through the aisles with the confidence of people who have never asked, "Is this on sale?" Their carts overflow with steaks, imported cheeses and snacks with packaging so shiny it should come with a warning for pilots. They shop as though the grocery store is merely a formality, a place to pick up luxuries between yacht trips. You, on the other hand, are engaged in open combat with inflation's sneaky cousin, grocery inflation, the quiet thief. It doesn't rob you dramatically like a masked bandit, it just gently removes a coin every time you blink. Back home, you unload your groceries with a newfound respect for everything in the bag. The bread, now precious, the eggs, handled like priceless relics, the beans, your dependable old friends. You check the pantry and start rearranging like a general preparing for winter. Canned goods up front, boxed items within reach, snacks hidden like treasure from the younger members of the household. Dinner becomes a negotiation between creativity and despair. You fry onions to make the house smell hopeful. You season everything aggressively because spices are cheaper than therapy. And when your family sits down to eat, you pretend this was the plan all along, a simple, hearty, rustic meal, not a budgetary compromise disguised as cuisine. But even in the midst of this grocery chaos, community persists. Your neighbour shares a recipe for stretching ground beef into something that resembles abundance. Another offers half a bag of flour because she knows what it's like to check her wallet and feel personally attacked. These small acts of solidarity become lifelines, and still, as you lie in bed that night, you can't help but think about the wealthy, the ones who shop without flinching, who buy without calculating, who never have to decide between butter and bus fare. They live in a different grocery universe, where inflation is something mentioned on the radio, not something fought with coupons at dawn. Meanwhile, you sharpen your bean-based combat strategies and prepare for another round with the price tags tomorrow. Because in 1950s America, groceries aren't just food. They're a daily reminder of who gets to thrive and who has to strategize their way through the produce aisle. You try to keep up. White picket fence, new car, polite smile, and realize the dream requires a budget only millionaires find sustainable. At first glance, the American dream looks adorable. It's sold to you like a starter kit. One tidy house, one cheerful spouse, 2 well-behaved children, a dog with a name like Buddy or Scout, and a car that gleams as brightly as your social anxiety when neighbours wave. You buy into it because everyone else seems to be buying into it. You paint the fence, you rake the lawn, you try smiling back at the neighbour even though you're pretty sure that's the same man who reported your trash can for improper placement. But the cracks start to show the moment you try to afford the aesthetic. That adorable picket fence. Expensive to install, they're expensive to paint, and somehow even more expensive to maintain. The new car, the monthly payment haunts you like a polite but persistent ghost. The polite smile? Free, technically, but emotionally taxing. Let's talk about the house. Owning a home is supposed to be the crown jewel of the dream. The moment you stand on your porch and feel triumphant, like you've beaten the system. Except the system is standing right behind you, flipping through invoices for plumbing, roofing, utilities, property taxes, and the mysterious fee labelled miscellaneous, which is financial shorthand for don't ask questions. Every month something breaks, a pipe, a step, your will to live. You buy tools you don't know how to use. You patch things temporarily with tape and hope. Meanwhile, wealthy families remodel kitchens on a whim. You replace a kitchen tile and need 3 days to recover. Then there's the car. The dream requires a shiny new one, sleek, stylish, and financially ruinous. Your neighbours seem to swap vehicles every 2 years, like cars are collectible figurines. You buy one car, watch its value plummet the moment you turn the key, and suddenly every dashboard light becomes a cryptic omen. Gas prices rise, insurance rises, even the cost of wiping the windshield feels suspect. Entertainment is another invisible category. Ads bombard you with visions of weekend barbecues, family vacations, matching patio furniture, and holiday decor your kids will remember fondly. But the price tags are overwhelming. You start improvising, picnics instead of vacations, hand-me-down toys instead of shiny new ones, outdoor chairs purchased only after a dramatic internal debate. And then, education. You're told your kids should participate in extracurriculars to become well-rounded. Piano lessons, sports leagues, scouting groups, each one comes with registration fees, uniforms, transportation, and snacks. A single baseball season costs more than your first car. Wealthy families manage with ease. You manage with coupons, stress, and the constant hope that cleats can be handed down. Social appearance is its own category, one no one admits exists. Hosting dinner parties, owning a decent set of dishes, dressing your kids in clothes that at least look new, being perceived as keeping up even when you're holding everything together with enthusiasm and a budget that feels more like a dare. The American dream was marketed as attainable, simple, wholesome, patriotic. But achieving the curated version shown on TV requires a steady stream of cash, an absence of emergencies, and the kind of financial padding only a small fraction of households ever truly had. For everyone else, it becomes a juggling act, pretending the dream is within reach while quietly calculating how far behind you're falling. Yet despite the exhaustion, the dream lingers in your mind. Not the glossy version, but your own edited edition, one where comfort matters more than appearances, where small victories count, where family dinners don't require matching tableware or a spotless living room. A version where the dream isn't a performance, just a feeling. Because even when the price tags mock you, and the advertisements lie, and the maintenance bills multiply like overly fertile rabbits, you still hold the belief deep down that life could be a little easier, a little brighter, a little more hopeful. And maybe that belief itself is the real American dream, even if the picket fence still needs repainting. Your babysitter costs more per hour than you make. The wealthy, they hire full-time help who in their newspapers. You stand in the doorway counting bills into the babysitter's hand, feeling like you're paying tribute to a small benevolent monarch. She is 14. She has braces. She's somehow making more per hour than you do at your actual job with a desk, taxes and meetings that could have been memos. Meanwhile, you're wondering if it's socially acceptable to ask if she offers bulk rate pricing for children who behave occasionally. Childcare in the 1950s looks simple on the surface. Parents go to work, kids go to school, and someone, a neighbour, a teenager, a relative, watches them when needed. But underneath the simplicity is a quiet, exhausting truth. Affordable childcare doesn't exist. It is a myth, a legend, a fantasy whispered about by parents who haven't slept since the Eisenhower inauguration. The wealthy, of course, live in another reality entirely. They employ nannies, cooks, cleaners, and sometimes even someone dedicated solely to managing the ironing of newspapers, because apparently crisp financial pages increase reading comprehension. Their children are cared for by professionals in starched uniforms. Yours? You're lucky if you find a babysitter who doesn't feed them exclusively marshmallows. Let's talk logistics. You wake up early, rush to get dressed, and line up breakfast plates like you're running a diner on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The kids need lunches and socks, and one of them has a permission slip crumpled into the density of a neutron star. You glance at the clock. No time to take them anywhere. No affordable childcare centre exists within 30 miles. Your only option is to beg the neighbour's teenager again, and hope she remembers to actually watch them this time, rather than listen to the radio and practice her signature for when she becomes famous. Cost isn't the only problem. Reliability is its own adventure. Babysitters cancel because of school events, social plans, or sudden existential crises. Grandparents are busy or travelling, or politely stating they raised their own kids already, thank you. Meanwhile, wealthy families have backup nannies, secondary nannies, emergency nannies, and sometimes an older housekeeper who just adores the children and can step in if needed. Their kids are never unattended. Yours treat the living room like an Olympic arena the moment the babysitter steps out to answer the phone. At your workplace, no one cares about this. No one. If you mention childcare challenges to your boss, you receive the kind of nod that says, "I also have children, but mine are raised by professionals who are paid handsomely not to bother me." If you're late due to a babysitter emergency, the office glares at you as though punctuality is the final measure of moral character. Then there's the guilt. Oh, the guilt. You feel guilty for leaving your kids. You feel guilty for staying with them. You feel guilty for paying so much. You feel guilty for not paying enough. You feel guilty for working, guilty for not working, guilty for breathing too loudly near anyone who seems to have figured all this out. Wealthy families, they simply say, "Nanny will handle it," and the problem evaporates like steam. You notice this imbalance everywhere. At the park, wealthy mums arrive with perfectly groomed children, while you arrive with mismatched socks and hair that's holding on through sheer determination. At the grocery store, a wealthy family shops while their nanny keeps the kids occupied. Your child attempts to ride the shopping cart like a bronco. The cashier gives you a look that says, "This is your circus. These are your monkeys." And yet, despite everything, despite the cost, the stress, the chaos, you make it work. You juggle schedules. You barter favours. You pray to the ancient childcare gods that today will be a peaceful day. And every night, after they're finally in bed, you wonder how the dream of raising a family somehow became a part-time job plus a full-time job plus 3 side gigs. Because childcare in 1950s, America wasn't just difficult, it was designed by people who assumed you had money, free time, or a staff of 5. And you have neither. You're either shiny new Buicks in the driveways of the rich. Meanwhile, your car starts only when it feels emotionally stable. Every morning begins the same way. You approach your vehicle like it's a skittish animal that needs gentle coaxing. You pat the hood. You whisper encouragement. You turn the key with the tenderness of someone defusing a bomb. Sometimes the engine coughs to life, wheezing like it smoked 3 packs a day. Other times it groans resentfully and refuses to move, as if declaring, "Not today, friend. Today I rest." And when your car rests, so do all your plans. Meanwhile, across the neighbourhood divide, the wealthy glide into their driveways in vehicles so polished they reflect your jealousy back at you like a mirror. Their garages hold 2, sometimes 3 cars, sleek Buicks with chrome so bright it could signal satellites. These cars start without hesitation, purring like pampered house cats. Their owners turn the ignition key once, confidently, never bracing for the existential dread of a silent engine. Let's talk maintenance. Wealthy people service their cars regularly. They say this casually, like they're mentioning a haircut. You repair your car only when the situation escalates into open hostility. You learn to recognize the difference between normal rattling and this might explode. The mechanic knows you by name, by sight, and by the sound your car makes when you coast into the shop, praying the wheels don't fall off before you park. Gas prices rise slowly. Too slowly for wealthy drivers to notice, but quickly enough for you to reconsider every destination. Do you really need to go to the grocery store today? Can errands be combined? Could you bike instead and pretend it's for exercise rather than financial necessity? Then there's the bike. Your trusty old bicycle, squeaky, stubborn, and somehow always slightly uphill no matter which direction you're going. You ride it when the car refuses to cooperate, when the weather is tolerable, or when you're trying to avoid a conversation with the mechanic about valve issues that might as well be medical diagnoses. You pedal past wealthy families polishing their cars for fun, as if they need to remind themselves they own multiple machines that respond to commands. Public transportation is another adventure entirely. The bus arrives whenever it feels spiritually aligned. Sometimes it shows up early, sometimes late, sometimes not at all. When it finally pulls up, it hisses like it's disappointed in you personally. Inside, it smells faintly of old newspapers and the dreams of commuters who once hoped for reliable service. But at least it gets you where you're going eventually. The wealthy, on the other hand, treat transportation like a lifestyle. They go on scenic Sunday drives just for pleasure. You go on scenic Sunday walks because your car chose violence. They replace their tyres before they're bald. You drive on tyres so worn they've turned into philosophical concepts. They own road maps neatly folded in glove compartments. You own a map too. Yours is held together with tape and the desperate belief that shortcuts really exist. And parking? The wealthy stroll into reserved parking spots right next to entrances. You circle the lot like a medieval pilgrim searching for a miracle. When you finally find a spot, it's uphill, half on gravel, and approximately 3 time zones away from the building. One afternoon, your wealthy neighbour invites you to admire his newest Buick. He opens the door with a flourish. Inside, the seats are soft, the dashboard gleams, and the radio actually works without static. You nod politely while feeling a deep, simmering envy. He pats the fender proudly and says, gets 20 miles to the gallon. Your car, on the other hand, gets 20 miles per every emotional breakdown. But here's the thing. Despite all the struggles, transportation becomes a badge of resilience. You learn how to coast down hills to conserve gas. You master the art of jump-starting a car in under 60 seconds. You develop a supernatural ability to hear mechanical problems before they become visible to the naked eye. Because while wealthy families experience transportation as convenience, you experience it as survival. 2 Buicks for them, 1 bicycle for you, and somehow you still get where you need to go, even if it takes patience, prayer, and a little bit of downhill momentum. A simple broken ankle is enough to financially ruin you. For the rich, it's just another round of golf postponed. You didn't fall from a cliff. You didn't get trampled by a circus elephant. You simply slipped on an uneven sidewalk, one of those innocent-looking cracks that city planners pretend not to see. You hear a snap, feel a jolt of pain, and suddenly your entire financial future is resting uncomfortably in a plaster cast. By the time someone helps you hobble into the doctor's office, you already know the ankle isn't the real problem. The bill will be. The doctor takes one look, nods solemnly, and sends you for x-rays. A process that feels like it costs roughly the price of a small boat. The nurse wraps your ankle, the receptionist hands you a stack of papers, and everyone wishes you well with the polite tone of people who know you're about to be devastated by what insurance doesn't cover. Meanwhile, across town, a wealthy golfer sprains the same ankle, shrugs, and calls his personal doctor, who arrives at his home like a medical butler. The golfer elevates his foot, sips iced tea, and laughs about how annoying it is to miss a single afternoon on the green. His biggest worry is which golf cart colour he'll choose next season. Yours? Yours is how to pay for the x-ray, the cast, the crutches, the follow-up appointments, and the inevitable collection notices. Let's talk costs. The office visit alone costs more than your monthly grocery budget. The cast costs more than your car's last repair. The crutches come with a handwritten price tag that feels like a personal attack. Each line item on the bill whispers the same phrase. Should have been born rich. Even the gauze feels extravagant. You attempt to negotiate at the front desk, politely, quietly, desperately, but the receptionist just gives you the look that says, "We empathise with your suffering, but also no." She hands you a payment plan brochure that might as well be titled, "So You've Chosen Debt." At home, you prop your foot up on a pillow and stare at the bills spreading across your table like unwelcome dinner guests. You try to calculate how long it will take to pay everything off. A year, 2 years, longer. You're not sure because the numbers keep shifting, like the bills themselves are taunting you. Then comes the real nightmare: missing work. A broken ankle means missed shifts, reduced hours, and co-workers who genuinely care, but also desperately need someone to cover tomorrow's schedule. Your boss sighs sympathetically, but the company policy handbook is clear. Injuries are unfortunate, but productivity must continue. The company sends you a card wishing you a speedy recovery and also a reminder to return as soon as possible. Meanwhile, wealthy patients don't lose income. They don't lose sleep. They don't lose anything except a few afternoons of leisure. Their injuries are inconveniences. Yours are economic catastrophes. The spiral continues. Medical bills lead to late fees lead to threats lead to stress. Stress leads to more health issues lead to more bills. It's like a financial merry-go-round designed by someone who thinks suffering builds character. To cope, you downgrade dinners, you patch up old clothes, you reuse tea bags, you refuse to buy anything that isn't absolutely essential. And even then, you hesitate. You master the art of limping with dignity. You learn to shower with your cast hanging out of the tub like a sad, soggy flag. But in the midst of all this chaos, something else appears: community. Neighbours drop off meals, friends lend you magazines, someone offers a used pair of crutches just in case. It doesn't erase the debt, but it does soften the edges of the panic. Still, as you limply shuffle to your mailbox weeks later and open another envelope stamped urgent, you wonder how a country that sells itself as the land of opportunity manages to bankrupt people for the crime of having bones. A broken ankle shouldn't break your spirit, it shouldn't break your savings. And yet, in 1950s America, it breaks everything except the system that caused it. You walk through a town where everything looks friendly until you notice certain neighborhoods receive funding, policing, and grocery stores, and others receive nothing. At first glance, the town feels wholesome enough to be printed on a postcard. Tree-lined streets, fresh paint, neighbors waving with the synchronized precision of a small-town parade. But as you wander deeper, you begin to sense the invisible lines drawn through the community, lines that aren't on any official map but dictate everything from where the sidewalks end to where opportunity begins. It's segregation, not by law, but by ledger. You cross into the next neighborhood and instantly feel the difference. The smooth pavement suddenly splinters into gravel. The houses shrink. The lawns turn patchy. And the streetlights flicker like they're burning whatever energy the richer part of town didn't use up. Children play hopscotch on cracked concrete. A lone corner store sells bread, canned beans, and a suspiciously dented tin of fruit cocktail. Fresh produce is treated like contraband. Meanwhile, 2 blocks over, the wealthier neighborhood has a grocery store with aisles so bright they could host a medical exam. Fruit arranged like artwork. Bread warm enough to melt your stress on contact. Clerks greeting shoppers like royalty. No flickering lights, no potholes, just a golden aura of privilege. Let's talk about services. In the wealthy district, the police patrol gently, waving, chatting, ensuring no one's mailbox gets dented. But in the poorer district, patrolling shifts into surveillance. Officers drive slowly, watching residents like suspects rather than citizens. Not hostile, but not comforting either, like being supervised by a disappointed hall monitor. And then there's funding. The nicer part of town gets new developments, parks with real grass, playgrounds that don't creak ominously, schools with fresh paint and fully stocked libraries. Over here, the school looks like it survived a mild natural disaster. The windows rattle. The playground is one lone seesaw that refuses to seesaw. The library has books older than the principal. City council meetings reveal the truth, if you listen closely. Funding proposals always seem to fit the budget when benefiting neighborhoods with higher incomes and lighter complexions. But proposals for your side of town mysteriously stall. We don't have the resources this year, they say, this year meaning every year. The wealthy call it just how things are. You call it what it is. Segregation wrapped in economic language, tied with bureaucratic string. Walking further, you notice the housing divide. Mortgages approved on one side of town are denied here with suspicious consistency. Banks insist it's about market risk. But the risk always happens to line up with invisible boundaries everyone understands but no one acknowledges. Realtors steer families with the subtlety of chess players. You'd be happier over here, they say to some. You'd be safer over there, they say to others. The board is rigged before anyone rolls the dice. Public transportation tells the same story. Buses run frequently in wealthy neighborhoods, arriving like courteous dinner guests. In poorer areas, the bus schedule operates according to cosmic whim. Sometimes they arrive, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the bus driver waves apologetically while rolling past, already too full. And yet, for all its structural neglect, this side of town hums with life. Kids play games invented on the spot. Neighbours share sugar, tools, meals, gossip, and the comfort of knowing everyone else is also navigating the same broken system. Music spills out of doorways. People gather on porches. Someone grills something that smells far better than it should. Hope grows in the cracks. Because while the wealthy neighbourhoods have pristine sidewalks, this community has resilience carved into every surface, strength built out of necessity, pride that doesn't need manicured lawns to exist. Still, it's impossible not to notice the pattern. The people with the least are asked to make do with even less, and the people with the most are rewarded with more. Hidden segregation isn't hidden at all, it's written into the roads, the schools, the stores, the services, every quiet system shaping who gets opportunity and who gets obstacles. And tonight, walking home through the uneven streets that somehow still feel like home, you realise something quietly powerful. The neighbourhoods starved of resources are full of people overflowing with humanity. And the neighbourhoods drowning in privilege could use some. You attend a company dinner where promotions are decided by networking, golf scores, and whether your grandfather founded a railroad. The evening begins with the illusion of opportunity. You put on your best suit, pressed, presentable, and slightly itchy, and step into a banquet hall glowing with chandeliers and corporate ambition. Long tables stretch across the room, covered in linens so white they could double as wedding veils. Executives glide between tables like well-fed swans, laughing in voices that somehow always echo. You take a seat at the far end, where the tablecloth is noticeably more wrinkled and the butter knives look slightly bent. A subtle but important reminder of where you stand. The dinner opens with speeches, long meandering speeches about growth trajectories, team synergy, and the exciting future ahead. You clap politely, even though you're fairly certain these phrases are generated by a machine hidden behind the stage. You glance at your plate. A chicken breast shaped suspiciously like a question mark, a scoop of potatoes that taste like pure beige, and a roll so dense it might have its own gravity. Then comes the moment everyone pretends not to care about, the networking portion. Executives and their protégés drift together in tight circles, clinking glasses and trading insider stories. Their conversations are full of references you don't understand, private schools, vacation homes, investment opportunities, uncle this and senator that. You hover nearby, waiting for a natural opening that never comes. When you finally do approach, the group disperses as politely as smoke in a breeze. Let's talk about the corporate ladder. It is not as advertised. A ladder. Ladders are climbable. Ladders are democratic. Ladders do not require a secret handshake and a membership to the right country club. This is more like a set of escalators, one for the wealthy, moving smoothly upward without effort, and one for everyone else, moving slowly downward no matter how fast you try to walk. Your co-workers try networking too, but the results are predictable. Those without the right background orbit the room like moons, unable to escape gravitational pull. Meanwhile, the chosen few, sons of businessmen, nephews of directors, men whose grandfathers allegedly owned half of the state, receive promotions casually, like someone offering an extra dessert. Johnson's boy is getting a management position, someone whispers. You blink. Johnson's boy is 19. He once stapled his tie to a memo, but his grandfather owned a railroad, so apparently he's management material. Between speeches, the executives laugh about golf as if it's both a hobby and a sacred ritual. They exchange scores like stock tips. Promotions are murmured over 18 holes, sealed with a handshake on the 9th green. You, who have never held a golf club that wasn't part of a miniature golf course featuring a fiberglass windmill, are simply not in the running. Back at the table, you strike up conversation with a colleague who confesses he's been trying to get promoted for 8 years. 8 years of perfect attendance over time, and a smile that has developed a slight twitch. You recognise the look, quiet despair mixed with the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, hard work will be rewarded. But at this dinner, hard work sits alone while connections sit at the head table. Dessert arrives, a slice of cake so small it feels symbolic. The executives get larger slices. Of course. When the final speech wraps, everyone stands, shakes hands, and exchanges promises to catch up soon, which in corporate language means never speak of this again. You walk to the coat check thinking about your path straight, level, and somehow always beneath someone else's shadow. You don't lack talent. You don't lack work ethic. The system lacks openings. And yet, as you leave the banquet hall and step into the cool night air, something inside you settles. Because now you see the truth clearly. The corporate ladder was never built for you. It was built to display the people who already had the wealth, lineage, or golfing abilities to climb it effortlessly. Meanwhile, you'll keep doing what you've always done, working twice as hard for half the credit, climbing a ladder whose rungs disappear the moment you reach for them. But at least now you know it's not you, it's the ladder. You get 2 days off a year. The rich take entire summers to rest from all their passive income. You circle your 2 precious vacation days on the calendar the way ancient astronomers tracked eclipses, rare, mystical occurrences that happen infrequently and usually cause panic. You imagine all the things you'll do with those days. Sleep, relax, maybe sit down for more than 10 consecutive minutes. But as the date approaches, reality intrudes. 1 day is needed for a family obligation. The other is for fixing something in your house that has chosen to break at the worst possible moment. And just like that, your vacation is gone, absorbed into adulthood like water into sand. Meanwhile, the wealthy are preparing for their annual summer migration. They call it a holiday, which is already a red flag. They pack trunks the size of refrigerators and head to lakeside cottages, seaside villas, mountain lodges, places that look like postcards and feel like tax shelters. They sigh dramatically about how exhausted they are from managing their investments, as if reading dividend statements has physically drained them. At your workplace, asking for time off feels like requesting permission to borrow the company founder's skeleton. You walk up to your manager's desk rehearsing your explanation. You need a single day off to avoid spontaneous combustion. Your manager sighs deeply and says, "We'll see," which is workplace code for no, but I'm going to delay saying no. When approval finally comes, it arrives with the enthusiasm of someone handing over the last cookie, but expecting half of it back. Let's talk about leisure in the 1950s. Wealthy families didn't just vacation, they vacationed. They escaped to sprawling estates with wraparound porches and private docks. They sent postcards featuring their children riding horses. They had colour photographs processed, printed and displayed like they were announcing royal promotions. Meanwhile, your vacation photos, if you ever take any, feature a rusty picnic table, your car overheating, and someone squinting because the sun and life itself are both too bright. You attempt a weekend getaway once. Just once. The car breaks down 5 miles out of town. You spend 3 hours waiting for help, 2 hours riding in a tow truck, and the rest of the day negotiating a repair bill that feels like an ancient curse. By the time you return home, your vacation has cost you more money, time and sanity than staying home would have, and you still haven't rested. Meanwhile, the rich return from their trips glowing, literally glowing, as if their skin has absorbed sunlight and privilege in equal measure. They breeze into conversation saying things like, "It was refreshing to get away," or "We just needed a reset." You needed a reset too, but resetting requires stepping away from responsibilities, and responsibilities cling to you like burrs. When the wealthy are gone for weeks at a time, no one notices. No one asks questions. Work continues. The world spins. Profits rise. When you take 1 day off, chaos erupts. Papers go missing, machines malfunction, someone spills something catastrophic. People ask when you'll be back, like you've taken a sabbatical to Nepal. Even your vacation day doesn't belong entirely to you. You spend half of it doing errands you couldn't complete on work days, and the other half preparing mentally to return to the office. Rest becomes theoretical, something books talk about, but your body has never personally experienced. And yet, despite the injustice, you still daydream. You picture yourself lounging by a lake, reading a book, wearing sunglasses, eating a sandwich that wasn't rushed or eaten standing up. You imagine waking up without an alarm. You imagine quiet, peace, time. But in your reality, leisure is a luxury item, like pearls, yachts, or having more than one towel not dedicated to cleaning spills. You snatch moments of rest where you can, leaning against the counter while the kettle boils, sitting on the porch when the breeze is right, closing your eyes for 20 seconds before responsibilities storm the gates again. Vacation time shouldn't feel like a myth, but in 1950s America, for anyone who isn't wealthy, it absolutely does. 2 days for you, 2 months for them, and somehow you're the one who needs the break more. You browse a magazine telling you to buy things you can't afford from people who absolutely can afford to laugh about it later. The glossy pages crackle as you flip through them, each one shimmering with promises you were never meant to redeem. The ads show immaculate living rooms, perfect families, gleaming appliances, and hair so shiny it looks like it was blessed by an angel holding a can of pomade. Everything is bright, cheerful, and wildly unrealistic. The magazine reads like a catalogue for a parallel universe where no one worries about bills, wages, or whether the rent check will bounce like an enthusiastic puppy. There's a full-page spread for a refrigerator big enough to store a week's worth of groceries and your hopes and dreams. The mother in the picture smiles as if she has never once burned dinner, cried over finances, or wondered why the electric bill is higher this month, despite doing absolutely nothing differently. The father leans casually against the fridge, wearing a suit inside his own home for reasons that remain unclear. Maybe wealth makes you overdress for your kitchen. You flip to the next page, where a lavish ad encourages you to upgrade your living room furniture. Easy monthly payments, it promises. You read the fine print and realise the payments are easy, only if you're earning 3 times your salary and have no other expenses including food. But the ad insists your life will improve instantly if you buy this sofa. People will respect you more. Visitors will gasp. Your self-worth will skyrocket. All from a couch. Let's talk about how advertising worked in the 1950s. Marketers weren't just selling products, they were selling anxiety. They whispered that your home wasn't nice enough, your clothes weren't crisp enough, your meals weren't elegant enough. Ads weren't designed to inform you. They were designed to make you feel like you were falling behind. And the solution to falling behind? Debt. Sweet, shiny, pastel-coloured debt. Debt became the bridge between what you had and what you were told you needed. The magazine nudges you gently. Why not pay in instalments? Why not open a store account? Why not join the millions of Americans living beyond their means for the sake of appearances? You feel the pull, the desire to keep up, to belong, to have the life everyone else seems to be living on these glossy pages. But you also know the truth. The interest rates on these purchases could finance a small moon landing. By the time you finish paying off the couch, it will have lived through 2 children, 1 dog, 6 spills, and the decline of an entire upholstery trend. The wealthy, of course, treat the magazine differently. They flip through it like it's a menu. Their homes already resemble the ads, their appliances already match. They glance at the high-end products and think, maybe I'll get one in every colour. Debt's optional for them. An accessory, not a lifeline. Meanwhile, you ration your spending like you're preparing for winter in a log cabin. You know that buying even one of these advertised luxuries might require skipping groceries, or gas, or electricity. Yet the ads keep smiling at you, flashing perfectly white teeth that could only have come from a dentist you definitely cannot afford. Back at home, you stack the magazine with the others. Each one is a catalogue of careful lies. paper portals to a dream that cost more than you will ever make. You brew a cup of cheap coffee and sit down at your wobbly kitchen table, the one that didn't come from an ad, the one that has survived meals, bills, elbows, arguments, and laughter. You look around your imperfect home. The wallpaper is peeling a little. The armchair sinks slightly to one side. The radio crackles on certain stations. But it's yours, paid for, lived in, real. And you realise something quietly powerful. The ads are selling fantasy. Your life, messy and patched together and absolutely your own, is not a failure. It's reality. And reality doesn't need a glossy page to matter. Still, you do dog-ear the page with the nice curtains, just in case. You finish your long day with an aching back and a bank account gasping for air. Meanwhile, the wealthy tuck themselves into beds lined with investments made before you were born. You collapse into your chair, half furniture, half cry for help, and unlace your shoes with the exhaustion of someone who just lost a boxing match with adulthood. Your paycheck sits on the table like a sad little pamphlet advertising disappointment. You stretch your spine, which now makes sounds typically reserved for haunted attics, and wonder how anyone in this country ever gets ahead. And then you remember, some people don't have to. Across town, the wealthy prepare for bed in houses with staircases purely for aesthetic purposes. They slip under monogrammed blankets stuffed with goose down and smugness. Their wealth goes back generations, back to railroads, steel empires, land deals, and inheritance laws written by people who thought loopholes were a form of patriotic expression. Their money works harder in its sleep than you do on your feet. Let's talk about that cheat code, generational wealth. It's the invisible elevator that lifts some families effortlessly to the top floor, while the rest of us climb the stairs carrying groceries, bills, and the faint hope our knees won't give out. The wealthy aren't just rich. They were born into financial ecosystems designed to water their dreams before they even knew they had them. You think about your own upbringing. Hand-me-down clothes, hand-me-down toys, in some cases, hand-me-down expectations. You didn't inherit property or bonds or family businesses. You inherited resilience, which is admirable, but unfortunately non-transferable at the bank. Meanwhile, your wealthy co-worker, let's call him Preston because of course his name is Preston, spent the summer in Europe finding himself, only to return and walk straight into a management job his uncle arranged. His biggest struggle in life was deciding which boarding school shaped him the most spiritually. He will never know what it's like to choose between fixing a car and paying a utility bill. He will never experience the thrill of stretching leftovers into an entirely new cuisine. You glance at your walls, painted by you, patched by you, held together by a combination of stubbornness and strategic furniture placement. Wealthy families, on the other hand, call interior designers the way you call plumbers. Their children sleep in themed bedrooms. Yours sleep in whatever room the roof leaks least in. Then there's the matter of inheritance itself. You will likely leave your children wisdom, worn furniture, and maybe a life lesson about the importance of not trusting coupons that seem too optimistic. Wealthy families leave their children trust funds, houses, land, stock portfolios older than your great-grandmother, inheritance that births more inheritance, and the engine behind it all? Compound interest. The richest families planted their seeds decades ago, and those seeds blossomed into money trees that require no watering, just occasional glances from accountants. You, meanwhile, plant a saving seed, and a medical bill digs it up the next day. Still, you do what you always do. You endure. You save what you can. You invest cautiously, nervously, like someone approaching a skittish goat. You dream of giving your children more than you had. You imagine a future where the ladder isn't pulled up the moment you step on the first rung. Late at night, as you finally lower yourself into bed, springs squeaking like a Greek chorus of exhaustion, you reflect on the unfairness of it all. How success is so often a prepaid journey rather than a hard-earned climb. How some people are born at the starting line while others begin 3 towns over with a map drawn in disappearing ink. And yet, in the dim light of your tired little bedroom, something tender flickers. A quiet knowing that your life, though heavy, is honest. You built everything you have. You earned every dollar. You survived every setback. Generational wealth may be the cheat code, but resilience? That's the story they'll never be able to buy. You drag yourself home after a 10-hour shift, shoulders sagging like a deflated lawn chair. Meanwhile, wealthy families glide through the week like they're floating on a conveyor belt of brunches, golf games, and mysteriously flexible schedules. You begin to wonder if rich people have fewer bones or simply more hours in the day. The moment you step through your front door, your body emits a noise only dogs can hear. Every muscle aches. Your shoes feel like medieval torture devices. You want to lie down, anywhere, really, including the floor, and enter a coma. But before you even loosen your shoelaces, reality reminds you that your day is far from over. There are bills on the table, dishes in the sink, children demanding snacks, and a laundry pile so tall it may qualify for statehood. Meanwhile, across town, the wealthy glide effortlessly from one leisurely activity to the next. Their schedules are soft, cushiony, full of appointments that somehow all involve relaxation. They take long lunches, they take mid-afternoon naps, they take strolls in the park, walks on the golf course, and breaks between their breaks. Their lives look like brochures for rest. Let's talk brunch. Brunch for wealthy families is a weekly holiday. They sit on patios sipping drinks that contain more fruit than your fridge currently holds. They eat pancakes stacked like architectural feats. They linger. They chat. They exist in a state of leisure you've only ever experienced while waiting for water to boil. You, on the other hand, sometimes eat lunch standing up while thinking about dinner. Then there's golf, the sport scientifically designed to explain where the wealthy mysteriously disappear to for 6 hours. They call it exercise. You call it expensive walking. They close deals on the course, get promoted on the 9th hole, and discuss investments while wearing hats that look like they've never known sweat. You wonder what it's like to have a hobby that involves a personal caddy instead of a toolbox full of duct tape. Housework tells another story. Wealthy families have help, maids, gardeners, cooks, housekeepers. Their homes stay clean through the magic of other people's labour. Your home, meanwhile, stays clean through caffeine, panic, and yelling. Everyone pick up one thing, until the children scatter like startled squirrels. And relaxation. Wealthy relaxation sounds like fiction. They read books by fireplaces that actually work. They attend charity galas. They host dinner parties on matching dinnerware sets. They spend Sunday afternoons in hammocks, gently swaying like they're auditioning for a commercial titled Financial Peace. You'd think being rich simply gives you more free time, but it's not just time, it's energy. Wealthy people move differently. They walk into rooms like every surface is memory foam. They speak slowly, calmly, as though their nervous systems have never encountered urgency. You rush everywhere. They glide. You collapse at night. They recharge with spa days, massages, and weekends at lakeside cabins with names like Whispering Pines. But the real luxury isn't brunch, or golf, or finely pressed linens. It's mental space. The ability to focus on dreams instead of survival. Their thoughts drift to vacations, investments, redecorating. Yours bounce between, I need to buy groceries, and when was the last time I sat down? You try to imitate rest sometimes. You really do. You sit on the porch, close your eyes, breathe in the evening air, and immediately remember something urgent, like the laundry in the washer, or the child who needs a costume by tomorrow. Rest becomes theoretical, a concept you chase like a balloon in the wind, and yet, despite your exhaustion, something quietly powerful blooms inside you. You know the value of a break because you so rarely get one. You savour small joys, a warm cup of coffee, a quiet moment before dawn, laughter at the dinner table. Wealthy families might float through life, but you feel yours. Every hardship, every victory, every hour earned honestly. Because even though the rich seem tireless, it's not because they're superhuman. It's because they're cushioned softly, luxuriously, from the grind that wears everyone else down. You drag yourself home, they drift through life. And somewhere between those two truths you keep going. You push your squeaky cart down aisles where prices seem to rise every time you blink. In wealthy neighbourhoods, groceries come fresher, cheaper, and wrapped in shiny packaging that practically sings patriotic jingles. In your store, the produce is suspicious, the meat is emotional, and even the bread seems to whisper, "I'm doing my best." Your cart's front wheel wobbles like it's trying to escape the building, squeaking in protest with every step. You grab a basket instead, but the basket handle is bent, warm, and somehow sticky. The fluorescent lights overhead flicker as if they too are aware the store is barely holding itself together. You inhale the supermarket signature scent, part dust, part overripe bananas, part despair, and march toward the produce section. The apples are bruised before you even touch them. The oranges have the texture of basketballs. The lettuce droops like it's given up on life entirely. You pick up a tomato and set it back down immediately, convinced it's sighed. Nothing here is fresh. Everything here looks like it lived a full life, retired, and was pulled back into service against its will. Meanwhile, across town, wealthy shoppers wander through gleaming aisles where mist machines spritz the produce like celebrities on a spa day. Their fruit is vibrant, their greens are crisp, their bananas are the exact shade of yellow that food magazines pay photographers to capture. They bag everything in perfectly sized paper sacks that somehow never tear. You bag yours in plastic bags that stretch and crone like they're carrying emotional baggage. Then there's the price difference. You stand in your store staring at a loaf of bread priced like imported treasure. Across town, that same loaf costs less and comes pre-sliced with the confidence of a food item that knows it will be purchased without hesitation. How can identical bread cost more in your neighbourhood? Simple. Supermarket inequality. Wealthy neighbourhoods get discounts because they buy in bulk. Your neighbourhood gets markups because they can. Let's talk meat. You approach the butcher counter where the cuts on display look like they've seen some things. The ground beef is grey around the edges. The pork chops appear to be having an identity crisis. You eye a chicken that looks like it fainted. And the price is astronomical. You start calculating how many meals you can stretch out of one package. 2, 3, 7, if you get creative and pretend stew is just a state of mind. Meanwhile, wealthy families buy steaks so thick they cast shadows. Their butchers know them by name, greet them warmly, and sometimes throw in a complimentary cut just because. Your butcher doesn't greet you warmly. He nods. Once. On a good day. Packaging tells its own story. The rich get clean lines, patriotic fonts, promises of farm fresh quality delivered with a bald eagle's approval. Your packaging is faded, wrinkled, and occasionally ripped. A can of beans might be missing its label entirely. You hold it up, shake it, and pray it's not peaches. Then there's the checkout line. In wealthy areas, the clerks move quickly, smiling like they get dental insurance. Your clerks sigh heavily, scan items at the speed of erosion, and give you a look that says, "We both know you can't afford this, but let's get through it." You brace yourself for the total, knowing it will be higher than last week despite buying less. The system is unfair by design. Wealthy supermarkets benefit from competition, infrastructure, investment, things your neighbourhood hasn't seen since the Great Depression. Their prices go down because their customer can shop around. Your prices go up because your options are limited. And every increase is justified by phrases like shipping delays or market conditions, which is corporate code for we just felt like it. Yet something remarkable happens as you shop. People in your neighbourhood joke in the aisles, comparing notes on sales like strategists at war. Someone hands you a coupon they don't need. A stranger warns you which packages are freshest. A mother suggests a cheaper recipe for the same meal. Survival here is communal. You watch it unfold every time someone whispers, "Don't buy that today, wait until Tuesday." Because even if the bread whispers, "I'm doing my best," so is everyone else. You leave the store with a lighter wallet, heavier bags, and a profound awareness that inequality doesn't just live in bank statements. It lives in grocery aisles, produce bins, and every squeaky-wheeled cart. And tomorrow, prices will rise again, but so will you. You walk into a bank hoping for financial dignity, but the moment the teller sees your balance, she switches to a tone normally reserved for stray cats. Wealthy clients get velvet ropes, fresh coffee, and interest rates so good they feel illegal. You get a pamphlet titled "Budget Better" and a pen that doesn't write. You approach the counter with cautious optimism, clutching your passbook like it's a fragile secret. The marble floors and polished brass rails gleam with the kind of confidence only money can buy. The teller smiles at you, but it's the tight, sympathetic smile people give to someone who's about to receive bad news gently. As soon as she flips open your account, her entire demeanour shifts. She leans forward, lowers her voice, and begins speaking slowly as if financial difficulty has reduced your comprehension speed. "We do offer savings accounts for people in your situation," she says, pausing at situation as if waiting for you to apologise. She slides a pamphlet toward you titled "Budget Better," a thin brochure filled with cheerful cartoons that imply your only financial obstacle is buying too many milkshakes. Meanwhile, across the lobby, a wealthy client enters. Instantly, bank staff snap to attention. A manager materializes from behind a door you didn't even know existed. He greets the man with both hands, pats his shoulder warmly, and escorts him under a velvet rope into a private office. Through the half-closed blinds, you can see fresh coffee being poured from a silver carafe, the kind of vessel that only exists in places where overdraft fees are mythical creatures. You return to your paperwork, attempting to ignore how loudly the universe is mocking you. Let's talk interest rates. For the wealthy, interest is a reward, money that grows quietly overnight like a well-fed houseplant. For you, interest is punishment. The bank offers you a rate so microscopic it might actually be imaginary. Meanwhile, the wealthy earn interest at rates that suggest the laws of economics bend politely in their direction. You attempt to apply for a small loan, nothing extravagant, just enough to fix something practical, like a roof or a life. The loan officer looks over your documents with the air of someone reading a tragic novel. He asks about your job, your expenses, your plans, your hopes, your dreams. Then, with the confidence of a man who has rejected thousands before you, he informs you that your financial profile does not meet our criteria. Across the hall, the wealthy client is approved for a new line of credit before he even finishes his coffee. You shuffle back to the waiting chairs so hard they feel like moral lessons. You watch staff members greet wealthy clients by name, offering to expedite paperwork, waive fees, and accommodate any needs. When you finally return to the counter with additional questions, the teller hands you a pen that doesn't write. It feels symbolic. Outside the bank, you take a deep breath. The air feels lighter, or maybe your wallet does. You look down at the pamphlet which advises you to save more aggressively. You laugh, quietly, tiredly. You would save more aggressively if your paycheck weren't already behaving like a magician's disappearing act. As you walk home, You notice the differences everywhere. Wealthy clients stroll into banks expecting doors to open. You walk in hoping they don't close. They're ushered into private rooms with carpets that swallow sound. You stand at counters with floors that amplify every embarrassed shuffle. But even in the face of this financial fortress, you keep going. You keep depositing your modest earnings. You keep saving what little you can. You keep showing up, not because the system is fair, but because surviving requires persistence even when the odds feel manufactured. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. You deserve a pen that actually writes. And one day, maybe, just maybe, banks will treat everyone like a valued customer, not just the ones with balances large enough to earn their own zip codes. You get a ticket for rolling through a stop sign at 2 miles per hour. Meanwhile, the rich zip around, serenely knowing their missteps often end with a friendly warning, a wink, or the police chief inviting them to dinner. Justice may be blind, but in the 1950s it definitely squinted at bank accounts. You pull over, confused, because you're pretty sure your car wasn't even moving fast enough to be considered rolling, more like gliding, or drifting gently. The officer approaches with the slow confidence of a man whose ticket book has ruined more weekends than rain. He taps your window, leans in, and recites the infraction in a tone usually reserved for grave moral failures. It's about safety, he says, handing you the ticket with the solemnity of a judge delivering ancient prophecy. The fine is high enough to cause mild cardiac distress. You nod along, apologizing even though the stop sign wasn't even awake at the time of your approach. Then, later that same afternoon, you witness something miraculous. A wealthy driver, let's call him Mr. Whittaker, because of course his name is Mr. Whittaker, barrels through an intersection at a speed that defies physics. The police cruiser lights up behind him. You pull over to watch the spectacle, popcorn metaphorically in hand, except there is no spectacle. The officer steps out, sees Mr. Whittaker behind the wheel, and his entire posture softens. The shoulders relax, the eyebrows rise, the voice brightens. It's as if spotting money activates a secret friendliness protocol. Within minutes, the two men are laughing, shaking hands, planning a fishing trip. Mr. Whittaker drives away with nothing but a cheerful "take care" echoing behind him. Let's talk about policing in the 1950s, a system that claimed fairness, but behaved like a party host who clearly favours certain guests. Wealthy people moved differently through the world. They didn't get fines, they got advice. They didn't get warnings, they got apologies for the inconvenience of being stopped. Meanwhile, you received a ticket hefty enough to dent your entire fiscal year. You begin noticing the pattern everywhere. Speed traps positioned only in working-class neighbourhoods. Patrol cars cruising the poorer streets with the intensity of hawks scanning for mice. In wealthier areas, officers patrol with a more relaxed vibe, offering friendly waves at joggers and nods to gardeners. In your neighbourhood, they ask questions. Lots of questions. Even parking laws seem to bend. You park half an inch too close to a fire hydrant, and a ticket materialises instantly, like it teleported there. Wealthy families leave their cars wherever they please. Fire lanes, crosswalks, theoretical dimensions, and nothing happens. A parking officer might walk by, tip his hat and whisper, "Beautiful Buick, ma'am." Courtrooms reflect the same bizarre double standard. You stand before a judge, trembling, rehearsing your explanation for the rolling stop sign. The judge squints over his glasses, unimpressed. If a wealthy defendant stands there, suddenly the judicial atmosphere becomes warm, buttery, soothing. Fines are reduced, charges dropped, cases dismissed with phrases like, "We understand these things happen," or "Don't let it trouble you." It isn't just policing. It's the entire legal ecosystem holding a magnifying glass over the poor and a velvet cushion under the wealthy. Meanwhile, police chiefs attend dinner parties at wealthy homes, mahogany dining tables, champagne flutes, polite laughter. These are the sorts of gatherings where minor legal mishaps are brought up not as problems but as humorous anecdotes. Remember when I accidentally drove into the fountain? Someone chuckles and the room erupts. You drive over a pothole and pray your car survives. But here's the strangest part. Despite the blatant inequity, working class communities still maintain order among themselves. Neighbour watches neighbour. Kids are taught respect. People rely on one another more than on institutions that only half serve them. It's policing by actual community, unpaid, unnoticed, but effective. And yet, every time a police siren chirps behind you, your stomach drops. Not because you did something wrong, but because you know the fine will hurt more than the offence ever could. Wealthy people, they hear sirens like they hear jazz, pleasant background noise. Because justice in the 1950s wasn't blind at all. It wore glasses, and they were very expensive. You attend a local fundraiser where rich families donate impressive-looking checks that somehow manage to do absolutely nothing for the people who need help. The wealthy beam proudly pat themselves on the back and then drive home in cars that cost more than your yearly salary. Meanwhile, you're still trying to figure out how to pay for school supplies. The fundraiser is held in the fanciest building in town, a community hall built from brick, optimism, and several large anonymous donations that definitely came with expectations. The tables are laid with crisp white cloths, silverware that seems confused about its own purpose, and centerpieces so big you have to lean sideways to see the person across from you. You walk in wearing your best outfit, which is perfectly respectable, but somehow becomes 30% less respectable as soon as a wealthy attendee in diamonds glides past you. The event begins with a speech about coming together as a community. You clap politely. Everyone claps politely. The wealthy clap gracefully, with wrists that have clearly never lifted anything heavier than a fountain pen. Then comes the moment everyone is waiting for, the check presentation. A comically oversized cardboard check is carried out like it's a royal baby. Cameras flash, applause swells. The check has enough zeros to make everyone feel warm inside, at least until the small print reveals that this donation will mostly go toward administrative costs. You try to calculate what portion of the donation actually reaches real people. It's probably somewhere between very little and you'll need a microscope. Then the donors take the stage. They smile broadly, basking in the glow of public approval, delivering speeches filled with phrases like giving back and supporting the less fortunate, even though their version of giving back typically means writing a check smaller than their monthly lawn care bill. They finish their remarks with a flourish, accepting applause like Oscar winners. Let's talk about charity, real charity versus wealthy charity. Real charity involves buying extra notebooks so your kid's class has enough supplies. It involves slipping a few dollars to the neighbour who lost his job. It involves casseroles, shared tools, carpools, babysitting favours, and everyone in the neighbourhood pitching in because no one else will. Wealthy charity? It involves donating a sum of money carefully calculated to be large enough for publicity, but small enough to avoid affecting their lifestyle. It often comes with tax deductions, public admiration, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they can mention this at dinner parties. You watch as guests sip sparkling drinks and eat hors d'oeuvres with names so fancy you need subtitles. Meanwhile, you're thinking about the cost of backpacks, pencils, and shoes. You're thinking about the fundraiser's mission, supporting families, and how none of the families being supported are actually invited to the event. The night continues with small talk that feels like a performance. Wealthy families mingle and network, treating the event less like a charity and more like a casting call for future business partnerships. You overhear someone saying, "Of course we give back, we believe in community," moments before slipping their waiter a tip so small it might technically be theoretical. When dessert arrives, you get a slice of cake that tastes surprisingly good, until you remember you paid $15 for the ticket to be here. Across the room, a wealthy donor stands and brushes crumbs from his blazer that probably costs more than your car. He excuses himself early because he has a tea time in the morning. At the end of the night, volunteers load the giant cardboard check into the back of a pickup truck. It wobbles slightly, bending under its own symbolism. The wealthy pile into their shiny cars, Cadillacs, Buicks, Packards, while praising one another's generosity. Headlights flash, engines purr. They glide off like benevolent monarchs returning to their castles. You walk home under dim street lamps, the night air cool, the sidewalk cracked. Your shoes pinch. Your wallet feels no heavier, and the school supply list tucked in your pocket still reads the same as it did yesterday. Long, expensive, urgent. And here's the quiet truth the fundraiser will never admit. Charity that doesn't change anything isn't charity at all. It's theatre. And you, exhausted and resourceful and doing your best, have been performing real generosity every day, without applause, cameras or velvet ropes. So tonight, as you settle into your clean sheets, with your thermostat set to something civilized and your fridge humming like a loyal little robot, take a quiet moment to breathe. Because you've just survived a whole day in 1950s America, a world where the rich floated comfortably above it all while everyone else tried to climb a ladder missing half its rungs. You navigated the suburbs you couldn't buy into, the jobs that dangled raises like urban legends, the banks that treated your money like it was contagious, and the grocery stores where every price tag felt like a personal attack. You watched as loopholes opened magically only for the wealthy, while everyone else patched shoes, stretched paychecks, and hoped the American dream would eventually notice their address. And yet, through all the barriers, the red lines, the whispered not-for-you policies, ordinary people kept pushing. They worked, they built, they saved, they dreamed. Not because the system was fair, but because humans are stubbornly hopeful, even when their tax returns are not. It's easy to forget that the comforts we have now, the loans with clear terms, the labour rights won through sweat and grit, the neighbourhoods built on inclusion instead of exclusion, all came from people who refused to stay quiet, even when staying quiet was the easiest thing to do. So as you drift off tonight, remember, history may be unfair, uncomfortable, and occasionally ridiculous, but it also shows just how resilient people can be, that the American dream wasn't handed down by the wealthy, it was carved out by those who were told they didn't belong in it. And maybe whisper a small thank you to your ancestors, the ones who fought for fair wages, civil rights, safer workplaces, and schools where every kid could learn even if they couldn't afford fencing lessons or a Buick in every colour. Because life today still has its challenges, but at least you're not trapped in a 1950s mortgage meeting with a banker who sees your entire future in the colour of a map. Sleep well, friend. You've earned it. Good night.